Yeah, you got to be able to do that every once in a while. I'm going to call the February 17th Town of Los Gatos Town Council meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to look at the fire marshal and see how we are doing outside. Are we okay for seats? If you are standing, hopefully we have extra seats outside. And if some of you that are in here, if you've got a little bit of extra room in your seats, that would be great. You could let some other people squeeze in. But other than that,
filling the other room outside out front of here already at this moment in time. If there is any seating next to you, I'm sure people out there would appreciate that. Other than that, no sitting in the aisles. If I don't see you at the moment, that's great. And I think I'll put it back into your hand.
all right, thank you very much. Now you know that he'll come after you if you sit in the aisle, so make sure. Thank you for coming on ski week. There's no snow anyway, so I don't feel that bad. At this time, I ask everyone to please silence your device. We would really appreciate it. It gets very distracting if your device goes off. So not just vibrate, but silence it, please. You can have it on, but just make it not make noise. Now is the time in our meeting where we take the roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Mariko Sayoc.
Present.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Marcia Jensen.
Here. I would now like to call Shamil Jain. Are you here? Come on up. This is a time in our meeting where we invite a young person from Los Gatos who's particularly good and we're proud of, and who's brave enough to stand up here in front of all of you and give the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Shamil, who I had the pleasure of meeting, I guess, a year ago when I interviewed for Youth Commission. And Shamil is now a member, alternate member of the Youth Commission, where he serves with his brother. And he's going to be presenting to us later tonight. He's also a freshman at Los Gatos High School, where he's on the water polo team and the swim team. He's a robotics coach for Van Meter students. He does that in his spare time for 4th and 5th graders. They make Lego robots. And if you've seen the Lego movie, that is awesome. He built robots in middle school and wanted to share that with the Van Meter students. He is also the recipient of the Alexis Brisky Service Award when he was at Fisher in 8th grade. It's a service award. People are nominated by their teachers for volunteer work they do in the community. And my favorite thing about Shamil when I first met him, and now I'll share with you, is that he won an award in 2014 as the Los Gatos United Soccer Youth Referee of the Year. And I think that is just amazing that you can referee soccer. And if I need some help tonight, Shamil is going to be here for a while, so he knows how to do it. So Shamil, let's give him a little round of applause. And will you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Now is the time for a closed session report. Do we have a report, Mr. Schultz?
Yes, good evening. Council met in closed session prior to tonight's regular session to discuss personnel matters involving the town manager. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act. The meeting was also continued to tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. at Town Hall.
Thank you. It's now the time when members of the council report on activities that they have engaged in on the town's behalf since our last meeting. It's an opportunity for them to report to their fellow council members on items that may be of interest to all of us and to members of our community about different functions that we all serve on in between these council meetings where you see us. So anyone have something to report? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At your appointment, I attended the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee, which is a county board that hears applications for grants for, it could be for building housing or other community requests, such as in Los Gatos we have Live Oak Nutrition. They were one of the ones that applied. So we listened to all of these applications on Monday night, and on March 2nd we'll be returning to actually determine how much we give to them. So that was last Monday, and then on Thursday I also attended the Cities Association at your appointment also. I guess two things of interest. There was a presentation on how to a community plan to end homeless that was quite interesting. And the second one was there was also a presentation about the Silicon Valley Talent Partnership, which is an organization that they get grants or something. So anyway, they do it for free, and what they'll do is organize getting community talent to help you develop a website or an app or other things like that. So it's a free way for towns to get good things, good work done for them. So that's my report.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the last meeting, the mayor and I have met as the policy committee, and in that meeting, we finalized some of our policies, and we will be sending about 10 to 12 forward to the council as our first grouping, some to ask you to approve and some to ask you to rescind. Thank you.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, I attended on Wednesday, February 11th, the meeting of the West Valley Sanitation District Board of Directors. I'm actually the chairperson of that meeting, and we reviewed our investment reports, our income and expense statement, and we did some other general business regarding a sanitary sewer flow study. On February 12th, I was at the Treatment Plant Advisory Committee, which I was appointed to by the West Valley Sanitation District, and our primary order of business was nominating the chair and the vice chair of that committee for the coming year, as well as reviewing the same what do we call that? The sanitary flow report. So that's it for me.
Doesn't sound very exciting, but it's very important. Thank you for doing that for us.
It's my pleasure to serve the town.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay. On February 4th, the Housing Element Advisory Board met. As a reminder to those in the audience, this board was created to specifically look at identifying sites and strategies to accommodate the housing numbers that has been given to us by the state of California. It's a mandatory state law that we must meet. The board actually did make a decision. We identified trying to maximize the North 40 site as well as one of our affordable housing overlay zones, as well as looking at second in-law units to try and meet the number that is that has been given to us. The next meeting is February 23. At that time, we'll be getting more detailed analysis of our report, and then that will then be forwarded to the Planning Commission and the Town Council so that there is significant opportunities for the public to weigh in should you be interested. The other report is the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority. This is the authority that serves Los Gatos as well as Campbell, Saratoga, and Montesrino. The only thing of interest is that the billing cycle will change so that you will get a new billing cycle. Your bill in April might look like it's increased in fees, but it's actually just 4 months instead of 3. So they just want to make sure that everyone's aware that it's not an increase in fee without proper notification.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayoc. As noted, I was also at the Policy Committee meeting and the Housing Element Advisory Board meeting. I would like to make a special acknowledgement this evening. We have with us Greg Larson, who has served as our town manager for the last 6 years. We would like to thank him very much for his service, and we'd particularly like to thank him for being here tonight on his 60th birthday. Happy birthday, Greg. And as our special present to you tonight, we would like you to do manager matters, and then we would like you to go enjoy your birthday with your family.
Thank you and thank you. So that sounds wonderful. Appreciate it. It has been 7 years that I've been with the town. The Weekly Times had it wrong, but that never happens. So thank you very much, Mayor and Council, and again for acknowledging my birthday and giving me this opportunity to go back home with my young kids. Do have 2 items I wanted to alert to the Council and community. First, we are launching our boards and commissions recruitment at the end of this week. This was primarily our annual student commissioner recruitment, so for the youth commission members and parents of potential youth commission members. Please go to the clerk's website after February 20th and encourage your youth to sign up for our youth commission or the other commissions that have youth representatives. We'll also simultaneously be recruiting for the Arts and Culture Commission, the Community and Senior Services Commission, the Parks Commission, and the Personnel Board. Last, as the council is aware, we periodically bring talent from the staff organization to introduce to the council and community. And tonight it's my honor to introduce 2 new employees that are fulfilling a particular focus and interest of the council dating back to last June's budget adoption. First is Alan Meyer, our code compliance officer, who's been with the town for several months now. And then joining him, starting this quarter, is Dolores Salazar, our community service officer, who's working with Alan in the police department for evening noise and alcohol and entertainment compliance issues. So Dolores and Alan, if you could be able to stand up and be recognized. We are scheduling several community meet and greets because they are very outwardly facing for the town organization with downtown residents and businesses. And with that, I will take the council up on its generous birthday gift and join my family. Thank you.
Have fun. Thank you. And welcome to our new staff members. Now is the time in our agenda where we act on consent items. A consent item is something that the staff has determined is essentially non-controversial, or it's more like an administrative item, and so the council can move on it in a single motion. That said, anyone on the council or anyone in the audience may pull a consent item from that consent agenda, and it'll be heard in its normal order. So tonight we have our minutes. We are accepting or looking at 2 mid-year fiscal reports. We are adopting a resolution regarding annexation on Loma Street. There is a new agreement with the county where certain properties, if they're in the urban service area of Los Gatos, will be annexed into the town. So that is one of them. We are considering adopting a resolution to support the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Spaces application to ABAG to make St. Joseph's Hill and the Novitiate Open Space in Los Gatos what the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District is calling priority conservation areas. That designation doesn't do anything regulatory with the town. What it does is make the town eligible for grant funding that may be available for those types of open spaces. The last item is to create and appoint a town council ad hoc committee to consider infrastructure, transportation, traffic management, and parking strategies throughout the town. Those are the items on the consent calendar. Does anyone on the council wish to pull an item? Mr. Rennie.
I'd like to pull number 6.
Okay, number 6 is pulled. I also have a card from the audience for Mr. Lockridge for number 6. Mr. Lockridge, rather than calling you now, I will hear that because it's been pulled. So I'll just put your card in for number 6. Anyone in the audience wish to pull something that I've just listed from the consent calendar? Okay, before I ask for a motion on the consent calendar, I actually have a question myself on item number 4. It's not really a question so much as it is a request to the staff that number 4 contains an attachment, or includes an attachment that's a resolution. And on the 5th paragraph, it discusses a 25-year-old zoning ordinance, but it doesn't cite it. So I wonder if we could just simply cite the section in the resolution, would be my request. So with that, is there a motion on the consent calendar? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move to approve the consent calendar, items 1 through 5, inclusive of desk items.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Rennie. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We'll then move on to our public hearings in order. And let me just say before we get to our public hearings, I'm going to make my little speech. I recognize lots of you that are here. We are going to hear item number 6 that's been pulled from the consent calendar. Item number 7, which is a report from our Youth Commission on reuse of the venue. Item number 8, which is the Hillbrook application for item 8. Am I getting this wrong? Yeah, that's right. Item 8, which is a conditional use application from Hillbrook School. Item 9, plan development, ordinance proposals. Item 10, Los Gatos Police, Los Gatos Montesrino Police contract. I just wanted to give a really brief summary because I know that there has been lots of, what should I say, misinformation in the town regarding how we're doing these public hearings tonight. And I just wanted to give a summary of the timing. Hillbrook was a special meeting that was on January 13th. It was continued till tonight. We are not going to have a public hearing on that because the public hearing was closed on February 17th. So I do have a card from Pat Parsegian. Mr. Parsegian, the public hearing is closed, so I won't call your name tonight. On January 20th, after their special meeting on January 13th, we heard a matter of the Veterans Memorial. That had been continued from a date in November, so those were 2 reserved dates. Another reserved date was February 3rd, where we heard the North 40 we didn't finish. That's got a reserved date of March 3rd. There had been different items on our agenda going forward for all of those dates, but as things moved, we changed the agenda to try to accommodate things. Among the things that had always been scheduled was the Los Gatos Montesrino Police contract. That remained on tonight's agenda. I'm hopeful that we will get to that tonight. The council action, if any, on that item will relate to the contract. Any other input on that item will be informational only for the council to consider. So I just wanted you to have the lay of the land this evening. And then I'm going to call item number 6 and ask Councilman Rennie your rationale or question for pulling that item.
Okay, so I guess my rationale is I noticed that the mayor and the vice mayor have been pulling all the load on the ad hoc committees lately and would like to suggest that maybe some of the rest of us should be helping to share the load. The transportation and parking is certainly a passion of mine, so I'm interested in that. One of the first things I did when I was elected was send the town manager a list about 6 or 8 ideas in that area. So I would propose that maybe the vice mayor would like to break in a new council member on the ad hoc committee.
Thank you for that. We'll certainly consider it. We don't have to appoint anyone tonight. We can certainly make a motion in concept to go forward with an ad hoc committee and then determine who might be appointed to that. So I appreciate your input. Thank you. Mr. Lockridge.
Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. I wanted it pulled, the consent item number 6, because I question the effective use of our council's time. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but wouldn't it be a better use of time to give the Transportation and Parking Commission specific directions to study these issues and provide recommendations to the town council for subsequent consideration? They already exist. We don't need to recreate the wheel here. Why do we need 2 bodies doing essentially the same thing? The description of our Transportation and Parking Commission reads as follows. The Transportation and Parking Commission reviews and recommends actions to council related to traffic calming, bikeways, parking, and local traffic issues. The commission consists of 7 members that are appointed for three-year terms. I think they've made a pretty good commitment to the town to provide the necessary research and recommendations to the council, and this ad hoc committee seems like almost a slap in the face to them. That's just my impression. And so does council really have time to pursue this study? I think that it would be better to allow the Transportation and Parking Commission to do their jobs and not duplicate efforts. Is there some compelling reason for this ad hoc committee that I'm missing? That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for questions, comments, motion. Councilman Rennie.
So in the description of the ad hoc committee, it only mentions, you know, the mayor and the vice mayor. Would this ad hoc committee also potentially have members of the transportation committee on it?
When there's I'll just answer it. When there's a council ad hoc committee, it's normally the council. I can also say that it's my understanding that the Parking and Transportation Committee is actually pursuing a similar project. So and I'm not going to say one way or the other whether Mr. Lockridge's comments make sense for duplication of efforts, but I'm looking to the council for its motion on this matter, which it can take whatever action it desires, obviously. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I personally raised the issue of this ad hoc committee with the town manager, and then either he with the mayor or me. I can't remember that process. But the reason I raised the issue with the town manager is because I've spoken with many individuals throughout our town with regard to the parking, a potential parking structure in downtown. And as when the redevelopment agency still existed, and I was on the council at that point, the town did obtain property in the downtown area, which it's now going to have to do something with since it's RDA property. And so because of my work when the RDA was in effect, and because of my work on the North 40, I felt as though we, the town council, could get some streamlined information from an ad hoc committee and then have this council give direction to the town and its commissions and committees as a whole. And so that was my rationale for suggesting that this process move forward as a council ad hoc committee.
Other comments, questions, or motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Based on the rationale of council members or Vice Mayor Spector's comments, I concur that there is some history to some items that may be coming forward regarding these matters. So I appreciate the historical perspective that she, as well as yourself, may be able to bring to this committee. So I'm currently have no issue with going forward with the ad hoc committee as proposed in the consent calendar. So I would move to approve item 6 as written.
Discussion on the motion or second? Or actually a second? Is there a second?
I'll second the matter. And with regard to whether or not there's duplication, this is such a high priority for all of us that I think in whatever mechanism it can move forward. I do agree that there's some background information that the Parking and Transportation, as well as several of us, may not have information about. And so I would just like to see it move forward in some fashion. And so understanding the concerns that there is another larger group out there, I'm sure that we can find the appropriate mechanism to make sure that those efforts are combined at the strategic point, and feel comfortable seconding the motion.
Other discussion or questions on the motion? Councilman Rennie.
So the way it reads, form an ad hoc committee with Marcia Jensen and Barbara Spector, but you had earlier said we're going to, talk about forming an ad hoc committee and then later figure out who's going to be on it. But that doesn't sound like what we're doing. The motion sounds like appoint Barbara Spector and Marcia Jensen to this ad hoc committee. Is that correct?
That I won't speak for make sure, but what I heard the motion to be what you stated, you could certainly propose to the maker of the motion an amendment to the motion if you wanted to do that, and then he could decide whether to put it into his motion or not.
Okay, so I guess I would propose that rather than assign people tonight, we, have a later discussion on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Rennie. Again, I think of the workload and as it's distributed among the council members as of the folks on television or watching us on television, those in the audience have heard this evening, we all attend other commissions and committee meetings outside of our roles as on the council. And I think of our personal lives as well doing this job. And I don't know, if the mayor and the vice mayor would like to take this on. I know that I personally would not want to take it on at this point in time, but I just thought because of the historical perspective, they may be the most two qualified. So that's where I was going with it. So I'm ambivalent about changing the motion. I'm open to further discussion.
So I will weigh in on it since I'm the one that actually proposed this. Normally, when we do ad hoc committees, we do just say that there's going to be an ad hoc committee, and then we appoint later, and the person that appoints is the mayor. So if Councilman Rennie would feel more comfortable having an ad hoc committee and then having it be determined with his input to who's going to be appointed at a later date, that is completely fine with me, if it's fine with the maker of the motion and the seconder.
So based on the mayor's comments, then, I will amend my motion to open it up to future appointees on the ad hoc committee.
And is that okay with the seconder?
It's fine with me.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion as it stands?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. We will move on to number 7, which is a report from the Youth Commission on the reuse of the venue. And for our staff tonight, I'm just going to introduce our youth commissioners. Shamil Jain, who you've already met, and Claire Strickland. Welcome. And there's a third person who I haven't. Can you tell us who you are?
I'm Crystal Huang.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so in October of 2014, the Youth Commission created a subcommittee to look at the potential need for a teen center in Los Gatos. At the October 21st, 2014 Town Council meeting, Council directed the Youth Commission to consider possible reuse of the venue and to provide recommendations to the Council in February.
Over the last 5 months, the Commission and the Subcommittee have met several times to learn the history of the venue and a place for teens here in Los Gatos, learn about the growth of teen use and services at the Los Gatos Library, learn how teen centers operate in other jurisdictions, develop and distribute a teen needs survey, analyze the data from the survey, and host a community brainstorming session.
So, judging from all of the data that we pulled, first of all, Mr. Autry, the principal of Los Gatos High School, was kind enough to actually send out an email to all of the students there. And a lot of students, I believe several hundred, responded to the poll. And from those results, we based our next movements. So, at our January meeting, we looked at all of the results, and we concluded that there really isn't a need for an actual reinstatement of the original venue, rather just some sort of alternative for students who are looking for another place to go or maybe some activities to do that wouldn't disturb people at the library as much as those activities currently are. So at our February meeting, so this past month's Youth Commission meeting, we concluded that it would be a great idea for us to do a request for proposal project where the Youth Commission could open up the kind of pool to local businesses, local community agencies, and see if any of those businesses would be interested in proposing some sort of alternative to the venue for youth to go to. So we're here today asking for your approval for us to go through with this request for proposal project and to actually oversee the project and to put it through to decide what would happen to the teen venue or some sort of alternative for it.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's questions for you. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Ms. Strickland, could you, for the people watching at home and the people in the audience who may not be as familiar with this topic, go down a list of some of the potential recipients of the request for proposal?
Okay, so our original idea for a request for proposal would be that, for example, I don't know if you've heard about it, but I believe it was the Los Gatos Coffee Roasting Company opened up their doors some evenings for people to come and play music. So that's sort of an example of a business opening up their doors and allowing youth to get together and do something really productive in a safe environment. And we thought it would be a good idea for us to do something similar to that with the teen venue concept. So if we were to oversee this project, the Youth Commission would be creating the kind of blueprints that local businesses would be filling out as to, like, this is something that we could provide for youth to come do. This is an activity we can have. Maybe we can open up our business for these few hours. It would just be an opportunity for businesses to, first of all, promote the business by having youth come, but also to become known around the town of Los Gatos as a place that really supports youth and can provide a really safe space for them. So that was our initial ambition for creating a request for proposal project.
Okay, so Ms. Strickland, thank you. And Ms. Strickland is amazing in many ways, so I know that she won't mind me using her as an example. But when you do get a question from the council, if you are speaking, we would appreciate that you address your comments back to us. I know you were asked to give that information to the audience, but you are on camera actually this way too. So if you could address anyone who's speaking to us, address your comments to the council, we'd very much appreciate it. And that makes it easier for us to hear too, because you're actually talking into the mic. So I think Vice Mayor Spector has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do have a question for you. With regard to the proposal, what you've just suggested, we are now in February, and the Youth Commission changes personnel after June. Do you feel as though this proposal can be accomplished by the Commission within the time frame between now and June?
Are you saying for us to actually look at all of the proposals that we would be receiving?
However you would define this project. So maybe that's the question. How do you define the project? And however it's defined, do you think you can get it done by June?
We would definitely see this as sort of an ongoing project. Our goal for at least the term of this Youth Commission term would be to, first of all, outline what we would want businesses to fill out in terms of what they could offer youth. So that would be something that we could definitely accomplish before summer and before the term ends. But I definitely do believe that this is something that would have to carry on into the next Youth Commission term. But I do believe that at least our goal for this term, it would be to establish what would be on the proposal, so what businesses would have to fill out, and then to begin looking over all of those, looking over the proposals at the end, but not actually going through the proposals that we would be receiving until the beginning of the new term.
Thank you.
Other questions for any of our youth commissioners? Commissioner Sea.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. I really appreciate the work that you guys have put towards this. And did you have a chance to review the staff report and the alternatives that were listed on page 3? Any comments on any of the different alternatives that was in the staff report?
So we were actually discussing this at our most recent meeting in February, and our thoughts were that first of all, it would be awesome to have, like, for instance, the school library open for later hours, or to provide those opportunities at areas that we already have. But we kind of concluded that it would be a better alternative specifically for youth, and essentially creating a better connection between youth and the greater community by having it at a local business or a local agency where there would be some supervision and we would have consistency in that respect.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We have some other people that want to speak to us on this issue, so we appreciate your presentation. Melissa Torin.
Hi. I'm Melissa Torin. I'm representing KCAT TV 15. So from what I'm understanding, the venue is up for grabs again. I think I understand that. I know it's teen-oriented, but we would like to submit a proposal for possible use for KCAT TV. I just want to tell you that we are very much teen-based. Last Friday night, KCAT broadcasted a live-streamed TV basketball game for the high school. And what was special about that was that we had 12 students come after school to KCAT to set up, film, direct, produce, announce, and edit these games. This is one of the ways that KCAT has value for teens and the community. We are growing in all the right directions and would like to be considered to submit a proposal for use of the venue. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't run away. Questions? Okay. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Ms. Torin, what is the amount of square footage that you currently operate KCAT out of?
That's a good question. We're in two very tiny buildings right now located on the high school campus, and I'm not quite sure of the square footage.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So just one follow-up question. If the venue, say it's about 3,800 square feet, rounded up, you were able to, I guess, absorb all that space, would you be able to expand your offering and offer more opportunity for youth to, I guess, get introduced to the world of film and television?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so the 12 students might be 24 students or perhaps more.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Phil Knopf. And as he's coming up, the other thing I neglected to say is that as you come up, you'll see the lights on the podium. Each person has 3 minutes to talk. The green light says you're fine. The yellow light says you have 30 seconds, and the red light says that you're done. So we would appreciate you paying attention to that. And I will politely interrupt you if you get to the red light. So, but I'm sure you'll give us a great presentation. Mr. Knopf.
Thank you. Phil Knopf, live in Montecito, East Vineland Avenue. I'm president of Los Gatos Youth Park, and we are the property that's adjacent to the venue where we house the Boy Scout huts and have other student activities down there. First of all, I'd like to compliment the Youth Commission on their survey. I thought it was very well done. And also to Heidi Murphy, the librarian, who helped supervise and guide that survey. I know she did a great job on it. And it was very productive and very informative. So I think, as the youth park, we'd be supportive of the Youth Commission in any endeavor they have in trying to follow up, an additional need for it. That's just in 2 minutes, so thank you.
I should also say you don't have to use all 3 minutes. We're fine with that. No. So let's see if there's any questions.
2 minutes on the table.
Let's see if there's any questions for you before you run away. Oh, thank you very much. Does anyone else want to speak about the Youth Commission report on the reuse of the venue? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for questions, comments, or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Well, I will begin by also thanking the Youth Commission for their extensive efforts on this. And there were a lot of different ideas that came forward in their survey that they took. And they ran the gamut from anywhere from the skate park to, of course, KCAT to the rec center and such, taking over the facility. Being that the recommendation from the Youth Commission is to go out and seek proposals for the reuse from private vendors and then review those and make a recommendation to us later. I am glad to give them more time. I would probably wish for that process to be concluded in the fall, maybe, because the building has been vacant for a number of years. So if for some reason, I realize we're coming up with a transition on the Youth Commission between June and I guess fall. So there will be new youth commissioners, but I would like to see that process get continued. And if it were not continued, then I would I think one of the better uses out in the community might be KCAT for that facility because of the reasons described by Melissa Toren. So those are my thoughts at this moment, and I'm interested in hearing what other council members have to say.
Other comments, questions, or a motion? Councilman Leonardis, did you want to convert your comments into a motion?
I will, since no one else is going to weigh in, I will move that we go with the recommendations on page 1 of the staff report made by the Youth Commission, allowing the Youth Commission to solicit teen-focused proposals for the reuse of the venue from Los Gatos High School and other interested community organizations, and allowing the Youth Commission to review the submitted proposals and make the recommendations to us.
Is there a second? Seconded by the Vice Mayor. Discussion or comments on the motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Sorry.
I do have a comment besides my second.
Please.
I want to also commend, I mean, those, you really, if you're out there and you haven't read the staff report, you need to read it. This Youth Commission did a survey with sophistication like I haven't seen in adult surveys. I mean, it's really good, not only in the way it looks, but in its substance. So I'm seconding the motion, but this was a great survey.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Youth Commission, continue your good work. Thank you very much. Okay. I know that all of you are waiting for, or not all of you, but many of you are waiting for item number 8, Hillbrook. But I just got a card. And Mr. Shepherdson? Where are you? This better be good, because verbal communications, we've already done it. That was excellent. Thank you. Item number 8 is conditional use permit application U-12-002, Environmental Impact Report EIR 13001, project location 300 Marchmont Drive, property owner Hillbrook School. We have an applicant and an appellant, which is Hillbrook School. And then we have a group of appellants, which consist of property owners in the Hillbrook area. So we have competing appeals from the Planning Commission action on this, which was to grant the conditional use permit to Hillbrook School with lots of conditions. On January 13th, many of you I recognize were here for the meeting where we accepted public testimony, and we did take testimony all night long, and we very much appreciated all of your input, and we continue to appreciate your input because we've continued to get your input. The public hearing for comments tonight is closed, but I am going to ask the council members to disclose any other items or meetings or et cetera that they've had since January 13th to today, and I'll start with Councilman Rennie.
Okay, I met with a group of neighbors at a home on, no, it wasn't neighbors, it was parents on Bella Vista last week. I also requested and met with Chuck Hammer, the president of the Board of Hillbrook, to ask some tough questions. Some of the information I got from that I gave to the town manager, and it's in our desk item, the little extra you got in the spreadsheet form.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since our last Hillbrook meeting, I have also met with residents who associated with Hillbrook School and at Bella Vista. I have met with Ann Arbor residents, and from those two meetings, I don't recall learning anything that wasn't included in our materials. However, the day before our last meeting I think was January 13th on this, on January 12th, I met with Mr. Hammers, and at that time, he had a suggestion related to using a maximum number, i.e. 880, and then increasing the number of exceptions. So that was something that I had not heard from that source before. So that was new information for me.
Okay, so I'm just going to go down the line. I also met with people on Bella Vista Avenue who I would describe as Hillbrook parents. All of us have received communications from many of you. We had a submission as a desk item today from Jennifer Rank from Hillbrook. Maybe Ms. Pravetti is nodding and she'll summarize these later, and so I won't have to. But we've received written communications, emails. I also, like Vice Mayor Spector, did meet with Mr. Hammers. I can't remember if it was the day before or the day of the January 13th meeting, and he communicated to me similar information. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Since our last meeting, I had the opportunity to meet with 4 different parties regarding Hillbrook, and all different kinds of points of views regarding that.
Councilman. I either want to say commissioner or something, but Councilwoman Saya.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, I also had a chance to meet with several parents at Hillbrook, also on Bella Vista. I've also met with individual Hillbrook parents. I've met with neighbors that reside on Marchmont and neighbors that reside on Ann Arbor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to see if there is any staff report. Ms. Pravetti.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to acknowledge, as previously mentioned, that there was a report that was submitted to the council last week that transmitted all of the correspondence that we received since your last meeting of January 13th. On Friday, we issued the addendum referenced by Councilmember Rennie regarding Hillbrook traffic by time of day. And then today we issued another desk item with additional correspondence, including the letter from Ms. Rank, as well as email from Patricia Elliott. So we are continuing to hear from all parties interested in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have a question. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the last meeting, I had a question of Hillbrook as to whether or not they had provided the town with traffic counts subsequent to June of 2014. So I will just, so everybody's on the same page. Have we received traffic counts from Hillbrook subsequent to June of 2014?
We have not received any more counts.
All right, that's what I thought, but thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. During the public hearing last meeting, there were several speakers who raised the question about Hillbrook being a business. Does Hillbrook produce revenue? Those kinds of things. So I was going to pose the question to address their questions. If a student population increase is granted, are we going to be collecting any traffic impact fees? Does Hillbrook pay a business license currently? And I guess what other types of revenue would be potentially received by the town?
Good evening, Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. In terms of traffic impact fees, there wouldn't be no impact fees that would apply in this particular situation.
And in terms of the business license, Hillbrook School would be required to have a business license.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, what I'm going to do is proceed with the council discussion as though we had proceeded with it on January 13th, so we'll all pretend. Or some of us will. So we have clearly all, I'm going to start out just to kind of take it on myself because this is not an easy decision for any of us. As I think all of you know and appreciate, the council, all of us in various forms have been working on Hillbrook or dealing with Hillbrook issues for, 10 years, 2 years, 1 year, however many it may be. So this has been a controversy, or at least an issue, that has been circulating in our town for quite some time. And as I've told many of you, and I look out and I recognize most of you, I think, so I've told many of you when I've met with you personally, that I think that the reason that this has gotten to the point that it has, and there's acrimony, and there our entrenched views, and there are people digging in, and there are people who are frustrated, there are people who feel that they haven't been heard. What I've said is that I see the responsibility for that not only with, well, I'm going to say primarily, not even primarily, shared between the town, which had or has a 2001 CUP, which was vague, which continues to be vague. When Hillbrook people are concerned about Hillbrook raised concerns, they didn't get a response. The CUP has not been adequately enforced. Those people with concerns were not given an opportunity to be heard. And the CUP is sufficiently vague that we have now that on January 13th, even one of the appellants, well, I shouldn't say that because everyone's an appellant, but one of the chief appellants opposed to the Hillbrook CUP conceded that the 2001 CUP has proven to be ineffective. So given that there have been failings in communication, there have been failings in providing information, failings in getting people heard, we're now at a point where we've had public hearings. We've had a lot of public hearings. We've had a lot of meetings. We have gathered information, and all of you have been amazing in giving us information, good information, thorough information, creative information. And what I'll say from my perspective, that most of the information that we've gotten from all of you has sought to be constructive. So that as I sit here tonight, while it may be easy, and I know I'll disappoint many of you when I say this, while the easy path may be to simply say no, I don't think that's the right path going forward. I don't think that's the right path for the town going forward. The path that I think is the right path is to craft a new CUP that is easily interpreted, easily implemented, and easily enforced, and one that provides transparency, predictability, and accountability. And the things that I would look for that would be, for transparency, I would want to see real-time traffic counts posted on a website, related to a school event calendar, and related to enrollment. For predictability, we would need to have lots of things, which I'm not going to go through now because I want to hear what my fellow council people have ideas about. But for accountability, we've already had suggested to us tonight and presented by Hillbrook a mandatory traffic demand management plan. That absolutely has to be part of anything that the council considers going forward. So my thoughts are, and I can be convinced by what my fellow council people have to say and the information that I know we all have and the different perspectives we have, that the path going forward is not a CUP, but I think with the right things and tools put in place so that there is transparency and predictability and accountability, that I would like to see a CUP that allows us all to move forward and try to put this controversy behind us. That would be my goal. So I'll look to my fellow council people for comments, questions, or suggestions. Councilman Rennie.
So I do agree with pretty much everything you said, and there may, there probably is some fault on the town in not responding. I did write some general comments, sort of as you've made, and I'll read them as I have them instead of exactly responding to what you've said. But I'd start by saying that I think, yes, we need a new CUP, but I think there's a human element to it. And I started off with my notes by saying that one of my values is that people need to, of different viewpoints, need to come together to understand each other's positions and cooperate to create the compromises. This usually starts with building trust, becoming more transparent, and giving the benefit of the doubt. I really appreciate those that have put forward the compromises and have made an effort to understand the other side of the argument. But I think there's been some room for improvement on all sides. I know there's been anger, mistrust, mistakes, even potentially some intentional bad behavior on all sides. So regardless of whatever CUP we come up with tonight, I think the solution will be better if everyone can do a reset, forget the sins of the past. And so my ask is for the head of the school, who I know is a professional, to continue to reach out to the neighbors, even if it's not successful in the beginning, until we break through the trust barrier. Increased transparency is going to be part of the solution, I think, as the mayor just mentioned. And I ask the neighbors to do the same and try to understand the school's perspective and to offer reasonable compromises. The Hillbrook parents, I think, are also part of the solution. I'd like to thank those for their efforts that have been doing carpooling and their kids riding the bus. And it's clear to me that they are developing or have developed a culture that I think if the rest of our public schools could get anywhere close to this, we'd really have much better traffic issues in town. I appreciate, parents that have told stories where they said they've agonized over picking up their kid in the middle of the day when he might be sick because they didn't want to add to the traffic count. So, I thank you for those concerns. But my ask for the parents is to keep it up. Even after the ask of this CUP is resolved, to continue your efforts regardless of where we go. And for those parents that, may have been a little less diligent, to help out your school with traffic so they can focus more on educating your kids.
Thank you, Councilman Rennie. Other comments? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. I want to go ahead and echo what has already been said. We've sat through several of these meetings, and for the most part, we've heard lots of positive and constructive comments. I have to say that more of the constructive comments have been happening offline, which I find oftentimes happens. We have the best discussions when we're not actually in these council chambers, when we're limited by the structure of a 3-minute discussion. And what I heard from all of that is there are areas of agreement and consensus that we all can come upon. That's on the area of transparency, that, as Councilman Rennie said, a reset almost, where moving forward, the data is available so that this mistrust that the past 10, 20 years has occurred slowly dissipates, and we can see that the real efforts are there and that it's not this make-believe scenario that people are putting forward, and that we actually see what does a day feel like with a certain number of traffic counts. I think that has been missing from the equation. Many of the residents that I've talked to said, yes, traffic has improved, but they are unable to put a number to that. So whether it's an average or a maximum, they don't know what that number is. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to ask, what is it that I'm feeling on a daily basis, and what should I anticipate moving forward? So transparency, I have some ideas that we can get into the details with that, but I do agree, putting it publicly on a website that is accessible to everyone in real time is an absolute must in my mind. Monitoring has to be a key element of this. And we can come to discussion on how that comes. But one of the key things I'd like to see, again, moving forward, is that we agree on what the data is, so that on a daily basis, when these kids go to school, there's not competing counts out there. I think really for a healthy move forward, we need to be able to Hillbrook needs to be able to take their kids to school without dozens of eyes staring at them. And the dozens of eyes need to be able to trust that there's data out there that we can all rely on. So that's another thing I'd like to see moving forward. And then enforcement. We've had different discussions on what enforcement would look like. Some of the items I've heard is it would be financially difficult right now. So in my mind, this reset button, whether we give it some time so that we actually work towards a common solution, and we have a time period, maybe it's a year, where no financial penalties until we figure out what are the growing pains, what is the real-time data, what are the real-time solutions. One of the things I've heard in all my discussions are there are different strategies to arriving at counting numbers. Some are right, some are wrong. We can have that discussion all day long, but I think we should be able to have a time period where we can move forward and not feel that the school is financially going to go bankrupt. Noise, one of the things that I keep thinking about, I've been circling around the community, is that we have a noise ordinance, and I'd like to hear from my council members, how can we utilize existing policy and use that to really enforce what's going on at the school so that we don't have to have duplicative efforts. And I do agree that we need certain restrictions, but I also don't want to write a CUP that limits to such detail that every time there's a new, whether it's a basketball tournament or a volleyball tournament, it has to come back so that there's an exception. I do want some certain flexibility so that a school can function as a school and that we don't need to always come back on a monthly and a yearly basis, trying to figure out what these after-school activities are and whether they're appropriate for a school. So those are the general comments. I can certainly, I've written some details that I think would be helpful when we craft a final CUP, but in general, I think we need to simplify, we need to make it transparent, and I think we need to look at a long-term plan so that we can all just move forward.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayak. I'm going to look to the Vice Mayor and Councilman Leonardis to see if they have any questions or comments that they want to share at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not at this point.
Councilman Leonardis.
Well, it has been eloquently stated by yourself and Councilmember Rennie and Councilmember Sayak. You know, going through this process, I want to say we are all Los Gatans. I met with groups of neighbors in one neighborhood, groups of neighbors in another neighborhood. I've met with Hillbrook parents. I've met with Hillbrook administration. And I think what we all want is what's best for Los Gatos. The school's been there for 80 years. I believe firmly that the neighbors don't want the school to be shut down. I also believe that firmly that Hillbrook's administration has gone through great lengths to try to improve the traffic conditions around the school. As Councilmember Rennie alluded to, it would be a great model for the rest of Los Gatos to abide by. So those are some random thoughts that I have regarding this. Whatever system we develop going forward, and I'm anxious to hear what Council has come up with here. But it's going to be something that is going to seem different at first, perhaps, but something we can get used to, and hopefully will become so routine that everyone will buy into it and they will love it, and we'll all get along like good neighbors. So that's what I hope to achieve tonight in this hearing.
Thank you, Councilman Leonardis. I'm going to go back and weigh in with a little bit of specifics. I agree with what I've heard so far. What I would be looking for in transparency would be a website accessible to all that posts real-time traffic counts. And I know that we have heard from people in the Hillbrook area that there is some distrust of the embedded counters. I've also heard from people in meeting with lots of you that tube counters aren't that expensive and another counter could be put just to have a backup counter. That may be something that I would like to hear from the council about. With respect to whether it's an average or a cap, I would like to see traffic counts that are tied to a school event calendar, because I talked about predictability. It seems to me that the school knows what its calendar is going to be. You know when you're having an open house, you know when you're having a talent show, you know when you're having a faculty meeting, whatever it may be. If you post your school events on a calendar online along with the traffic counts, it strikes me that the traffic counts could be adjusted based upon what's happening in your calendar. So there could be a designated number of days, for example, that you could choose based on your calendar any given month that would say, on this day we'll go over, on this day we won't, whatever it may be. In terms of predictability, that also comes into predictability. To have a calendar, people know what is happening at the school and they know what to expect. I heard that frequently, that people wanted to have some predictability in what the traffic would be like. There should be, I think, different traffic counts for the academic year and the summer session. I, like Councilwoman Sayoc, don't want to see the council trying to write into a CUP every use, because at one time it could be popular to take Spanish, at another time it could be popular to take Mandarin, at another time it could be popular to take Tagalog. So if I write in Mandarin classes and all of a sudden it's a Spanish class, then I violated. It seems to me that the basic thing we're talking about is how many people go into that school and how they get there and how they get out and what those traffic counts are, not necessarily what's happening once they get in. So that will take me back to Councilwoman Sayoc's comment regarding the noise ordinance. So I said I wanted to have a CUP that would be easily implemented, easily interpreted, and easily enforced. If a CUP is tied to an existing ordinance, it makes sense. If we have a noise ordinance that says that you can't go over X, it strikes me that that's pretty easy to put into a CUP, rather than trying to craft something particular for a particular location. That said, there could be, again, tied to a calendar, some limitation on amplified events, the graduation, whatever it may be. I know that there was discussion about landscaping. We now have a leaf blower ordinance, which you can't do anything on Sunday anyway. So it strikes me that that could be tied to our existing ordinance as well. With respect to enforceability and accountability, my ideas would be that there would be a mandatory traffic demand management plan. Many of you have said that it's fine that they have a plan, but we want to make sure that they actually have to do it. So anything that I would want to see in a CUP would be mandatory. I would imagine that there would be fines that were attached to violations, but I'm not sure that I agree with the fine structure that's in the Planning Commission CUP. I would be looking for other ideas from the council. I also would like to, in order to build trust, make sure that Hillbrook is demonstrating that it is accountable and that it is doing what it says it's going to do. So I would want to hear from my fellow council people on an idea of granting a CUP, implementing its measures, and then delaying any increased enrollment for a period of 6 months in the first year, or a 6-month review in the first year, and then an annual review every year after for the life of the CUP, where a discussion takes place about how is it working? Is this working? Is this not working? What could be better? What could be worse? And then if there are real things that need to be changed, a modification could be allowed at a hearing in the Planning Commission, or if it gets to that point, a revocation. But the important thing to me is that there's a review so that people remain accountable and so that everyone knows that they get to come back and talk about this. Because I think that one of the problems has been that we have not had a mechanism to allow people to come and be heard on whatever issues they have. So I would be looking for that as well. Finally, I know many of you, I'm going to say, are very concerned about Ann Arbor. I believe, and the town attorney will certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that our EIR document did not study the Ann Arbor Gate or opening the Ann Arbor Gate. So if the town council were to do anything with respect to that, we would need to do another CEQA study. But I also understand that that could be a focus study that wouldn't necessarily involve an entire EIR expenditure, outlay, details, somewhat like we did with council when we asked for more information with respect to the North 40 EIR. Where I would see that going, and again, I want to see what my fellow council people have to say about that, is perhaps encourage people to come together, if that's possible. I know many of you have very strong feelings about this, to see if there could be a way to negotiate the use of that gate for pedestrians, bicyclists, perhaps faculty, and perhaps do that at look at that proposal or any proposals along with a focus study at a 6-month review or a 1-year review to see if that makes any sense given the information that we have. Just to leave that open, because it just strikes me in talking to all of you that I know many of you believe it just doesn't seem fair that if we're asking the community to support something and enforce something, that all of the community members shouldn't be taking on a part of that burden. So I wouldn't be looking to fling the gates wide right now. What I'd be looking to do was to listen to my fellow council people about what they thought about a review, a focus study, a discussion, an encouragement of some uses. Traffic, of course, is a huge concern in town. It's a huge concern with any intensification of use, but I am hopeful that if we have a traffic demand management plan in place for one business, perhaps other businesses might want to have a traffic demand management plan, and perhaps we can do something going forward with that. So those are my ideas. I know that's a lot, and people are taking notes, and I'm looking to my fellow council people for response, argument, objection, questions, and ideas. Anyone? Councilwoman Sayak.
Okay. I spent a lot of time. What was nice about the format of our last meeting, listening to all the public comments and then having almost a month to really sit and think about this, it's given me a chance to hear different options and just start writing different thoughts. And so what I'd like to do is utilize this time to throw out different parameters to see if we can get somewhat of a draft CUP written tonight.
So am I understanding that what you're prepared to do is basically do serial motions? In particular, or you just want feedback on your ideas as you put them out?
I'll leave that to you, but certainly just listening to the discussion, it does sound like we have certain consensus around certain things. I think one thing that I heard is that the transparency, real-time monitoring data on a website. One thing I would like to include on this website of data is enrollment numbers. One issue that has come up many times during these hearings is how many enrolled students are actually out there, and there have been issues of discrepancy. So I'd like that as one other item that is placed on the website. Of course, protecting student identity, but at least the numbers of how many enrolled students are there so that these claims or statements of noncompliance all these years, we can actually see, is that true, is that not true? So, so it's enrollment as well as traffic data that I'd like.
Let me stop you and see, it may make sense that we don't want to write a CUP if that's what we're going to do as we sit here, I hope, but perhaps we can just convert some of your comments to, perhaps you could make it as a consensus motion and we'll see where we go on that and then move forward with other items. So your motion is for transparency, real-time posting, and posting of enrollment numbers as well, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Spector.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I have a question before we walk down this path. I've heard other bodies use the term consensus motion, and quite frankly, I don't know what it is. And so is the thought that we will be making motions? I know what that is. And if we are making a consensus motion, what is that? So I'll know whether I agree with it or not.
That's an excellent point. So Commissioner Sayak, I guess what I'm going to do is ask you, and the reason I'm thinking about doing it this way, and I love other people's input, is that whatever the council decision is tonight, it's going to be involving lots of different issues, and I think we're going to have to take it serially so that we don't put the graphic up on the board and ignore something or another. And if somebody has got some format for us to go through, then I think, at least for me, if we're organized, why don't you convert it into a motion, and we'll see where that goes. I'm not expecting the motion that you make with respect to these particular items to be absolutely detailed with every nuance of language. What I'm looking for at this point is a motion to see what might be included in what fashion in a CUP. So I think that if you understood that, you can go forward with that.
Sure. So you'd like to see an overall, not these little serial areas.
We can. Sorry, Councilman Rennie.
Just let her do as big a chunk as she can. Let's do it that way.
Go for it.
Okay.
Wait a minute, Councilman Leonardis.
Pardon the interruption. I was wondering, perhaps maybe a place to start would be looking at the existing Planning Commission approval and then the appeals, and perhaps we either accept or deny those with conditions added.
I'm going to ask Mr. Schultz actually a question about that suggestion. Because we have two different appeals, is the council in a position where it's granting an appeal, denying an appeal, or are we simply hearing this as a new matter?
Your motion would include either a granting or denial, but it could be denying both and coming up with your own conditional approval, or it could be granting both. At the end of the game, it looks like there would definitely be changes to the condition of approval. My suggestion, because I know it requires you to roll up your sleeves, but it might be the good start, is just to look at the conditions of approval and which ones need added language and what that added language would be for those different clauses that you have concerns with, or additional clauses. That might be one way to attack it.
Okay, what I prefer to do is to let, because she said she had detailed ideas, let Councilwoman Sayak give us those detailed ideas in the form of a motion. Get your pencils out or your computers out, and Councilwoman Sayak, I'm going to ask you to go through it pretty carefully and slowly so that we can understand it and put it into as much of a motion as you can if you're ready to do that.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Spector has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And before Councilwoman Sayak begins this, let me explain the perception or view I will take of the future motion. Because we started out, and first of all, thank you all for what you have said. It was very helpful. But every single one of you started out with the word transparency, and that is very important to me. And so when we're talking about issues like website, real time, those kinds of things, I could see that applying favorably to any motion. However, it seems that at some point, this council is going to be dealing with the issue of maximum versus average, and we're going to be dealing with numbers. And if this motion segues itself into those issues, the concern I have and what's going to potentially hold me back is we don't have the real numbers right now. And that is of concern to me because, one, it's not transparent, and secondly, it keeps me from understanding what number I should be weighing in on, accepting, not accepting, and it also impacts my analysis of Ann Arbor. So having said that, I will definitely be listening to whatever motions come forward carefully, but I will be very hesitant to vote in favor of any motion that encompasses an assumption with regard to traffic.
Okay. Councilman Rennie.
I actually have a lot to say on that, but I've been waiting. I don't know if we want to attack that first or go to Mariko's first.
Well, I thought that we might actually, since Councilwoman Sayak is ready with details, why don't we let her throw them out there, and then to the extent she converts that to a motion that contains something that you would like to make a comment on, then we'll take comments and questions before we call any question and debate it that way. At least it gives a platform for discussion. So I'm going to let Councilwoman Sayak go ahead with that.
Okay. So what I'll do, when I said I had detailed, I didn't mean I had actually written details so that a CUP could be crafted tonight, but at least parameters for that we can move forward. Since the subject of traffic has come forward, I will start with that. I agree with Vice Mayor Spector. It's very difficult to work with assumptions when you don't have real data out there. And therefore, whatever we decide today, it is my opinion that we have a check-in, whether I'm waffling between 6 months or a year. But basically, I would like to see the real data in real time, and I'd like to be able to have the public see that data as well. And so it is difficult. And so I actually am still looking at the Planning Commission's maximum of 880. I've heard different discussions of I've been given different scenarios of the exceedances. Right now I have 18, 19, 22 here from spring of 2014. But one thing that I have asked is, well, what happened during those days? And are those days that predictable so that first of all, are any of those days part of the exception days? Yes. So those aren't counted in there. And of those days that aren't, basically what happened? And is there traffic demand management scenarios that can help alleviate it so that they would fall under the 880? Those are the types of scenarios that I think we could solve if we actually had data available and that we could actually discuss. And maybe that is the opportunity moving forward for a group to discuss what are the different scenarios are there, how can we further improve these numbers, and if so, if it can't be improved, why not? And show me a different methodology why it can't. It's just very difficult for me to make a decision when I don't have the data in front of me. So I'll start with that, and I'll see where others are.
So I don't hear that as a motion. I hear that as comment.
Okay.
Expressing the same concern about real-time data or data numbers at this point. But I also heard you say you're starting at the 880 cap.
880
Is that
maximum,
correct?
correct.
Okay. Councilwoman Leonards.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I've been thinking about this a lot. We've received all kinds of data from all kinds of interested parties, and everybody has their own set of data and their own desires, and it usually supports their point of view. And we have many different points of view on this. So I thought, last year during our budget, we discussed spending $100,000 to do traffic studies in and around schools. And this is a school where perhaps that traffic study is needed most. And I was going to come up with the idea where I think we should provide the data for the next 6 months, put a cable out there for 24 hours a day, collect the traffic data, and then come back and find out what it really is. And then we can ask Hillbrook if there's a large day of volume. What day was that? What events did you have? And just kind of figure it out. I think that's the only way we're really going to get unbiased data, is if we go out there and we collect the data over a period of time. Not saying that the data we receive from the public was good or bad, but it typically supports differing opinions and different points of view. And I just don't think we have data. We're trying to pull a number from somewhere arbitrary. And the number that we're starting with was the number that was appealed by Hillbrook, and I'm not sure the neighbors are all entirely happy with that number either. So I say we go out and get the numbers and then study the numbers and then move forward.
Okay, I'm going to call on Councilman Rennie because he said he had a lot of comments on this issue.
Okay, so let me go through my long explanation then. I apologize. I did start off spending a lot of time trying to figure out, what's the appropriate amount of traffic for a neighborhood with a school like this. It's been suggested that 781 average daily trips was a number that would be good. So I started digging into where that number came from. And it was from an ITE study, which actually only had 2 data points, which was kind of surprising to me because I know in engineering school, if I did a study on 2 data points, I would probably fail that assignment. The 2 data points is sort of not very good science. It's because when you have a few data points, I apologize to those of you that are not engineers, but you get a large standard deviation, which is kind of a measurement of error. So if you try to come up with something based on 2 data points in average, you have a lot of error in your number. So for example, in this study, if you took one of the 2 data points, let's say the high one, and figured out, on a 315 kid school apologize for all the numbers here, but you would then end up with 982 trips as the appropriate one instead of 781. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you could pick the 960 that Hillbrook originally requested. That falls within this data set. You could pick the 880, which was average daily trips, which was later suggested almost by the Planning Commission and changed. Those all fall within the data set of which the 781 came from. So I don't think of the 781 as really a valid number. It's what's appropriate. So then some other suggestions were to look at the tire index as what's an appropriate traffic count. Again, the tire index doesn't work very well because it's really for telling if you can tell the difference between changes in traffic, not what's an appropriate level. Although if you look at the tire index, they do label anything over, I think it's 981, as significantly impacted versus moderate. So you might say, well, you got to be below 980 average daily trips if you want to stay out of that. So again, I'm searching for sort of what's the right amount of traffic. I think at one point asked the town, and I think Matt gave us a report, Mr. Morley last time, that we typically consider a residential street highly impacted if there's 1,500 average daily trips on that street, which is a lot higher than the number we're talking about. So that's not very helpful either to say whether, well, maybe it's somewhat helpful to say, well, we're not at the point that Los Gatos would consider it needing to be mitigated, for example, using our own policies. Of course, 880 is well below that. So then I started thinking somebody had proposed the theoretical 562. Why can't it be, that's how many trips it should take? And that's where I ended up digging in and asking Mr. Hammer last week, why is it not 562? And I, supplied that in your desk item through the staff. And it turns out that the peak times when you're doing drop-off and pickup is really only about 400 trips. But there's another 400 trips the rest of the day. There's 180 trips between in the middle of the day, and you're not considering things like the teachers going out for coffee or to pick up their kids or go to the dentist. There's probably about a quarter of that. There's service trucks and deliveries, and then, of course, there's some parents that are coming to pick up kids because they're sick or take them to appointments or whatever. So it turns out the 562 number doesn't really work very well for me either. So I then said, well, I can't really pick an appropriate count for the street. So I then said, well, what is the history of traffic, in this area? And so been some numbers provided to us, and there may be some error in them, but if you start back in 2000, we were at 1,400 average daily trips, and then in 2001 it was down to 996. 2011 we had 961. 2013 we had 868, and then reported to us in the spring we have 834. So it's clear that we've had the right kind of progress. Things are much better than they used to be, even though maybe people don't feel it, but the data seems to say that they should, or maybe they don't want to admit they feel it for fear that it'll get worse again. So, I still come to the conclusion that an 880 average is not bad to give them. That's where they were when they applied for the CUP. I think the ask that no new traffic with the additional kids seems like a fair ask to me. Maybe we even knock it down to 860. So let me address the predictability concern that people have with the 880 average. You can set up, you certainly say the average must be full school days. You can do things like, you can even say, well, if there's a really low day, like say below 700, you pick a number, we throw it out. It's not part of the average, so you can't manipulate the average. We can stick an average and then also a maximum, let's say a maximum of 1050, so that there's no crazy days that then can be manipulated, shall we say. Of course, I would exclude the 10 planned days where there's back-to-school nights and so forth. We already know about those. I've run through most of my thoughts. Let me stop there.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I looked at a lot of numbers too, and after going through, it seemed like thousands of pages of numbers, I sat at my computer and I summarized them. So I had page after page of number, and of course, depending upon what document you look at, the number is different. So I was trying to see, did they overlap at any point? People talk about the history of this application. The first time I worked on it was in the 1980s, and that's when Hillbrook expanded its gym, and there was an issue there as to how many students it was going to have. So this is certainly not an issue that doesn't have a lot of history and a lot of review and a lot of pages and a lot of numbers. I listen to what everybody says up here, and what is of concern to me, and I keep going back to that, we're talking about, what is the right amount of traffic? What is the history? And what we have in this history, because I've written the history down too, is we have this gap. And we have this 8-month gap of history. We have the gap from June of 2014 to February of 2015. Maybe it's going to even go longer. That's a gap that I personally need filled before I can assess what I think is the appropriate number in this future CUP. Am I looking at an average when I get that number? No, I'm probably looking at a maximum. And am I looking at exceptions? The Planning Commission had some exceptions. Yeah, we could have some exceptions. So I'm willing to go forward if people make the motions and say, yes, we can have it transparent, we can have it in the computer, we can have it updated, we can have the traffic count. Yes, I'm all fine with that, but I am not prepared right now, unless somebody says something just that really appeals to me, to give the number that we are going to use, because I have this gap, and this gap is an 8-month gap, and it really impacts transparency, and it impacts coming to a decision on the CUP for me.
Before I call on Councilman Leonardis, I'll just comment on what I've heard. I appreciate Councilman Rennie and Vice Mayor Spector doing the math. And I appreciate that there is a data gap. My concern with their comments is that, I guess my primary goal is that I would like to have something in place that where we can move forward. And I would not like to say tonight, we're going to put it off for 8 months while we get that additional data. I couldn't support something like that. What I could support is us coming together on a number, whatever that may be, with then what Councilwoman Sayak is calling a check-in in 6 months before Hillbrook is allowed to increase its enrollment anyway. And during that 6 months, that data is supplied. So we have a CUP in place. Data is being collected pursuant to the CUP. We have a traffic demand management plan in place. We have hours of operation in place. We have summer hours in place. We have after-school timing in place. We have a calendar in place. And during that 6 months, then we're able to look at all that data and have that in front of us so that when we get to the 6-month check-in, we will have those numbers. We will be able to look at whatever has been crafted in a CUP and say, those numbers look like what we thought. Those numbers don't look like what we thought. Are we going to modify the CUP? Because I would imagine a CUP saying, here's all of the conditions for use of Hillbrook as a JK through 8 educational facility. And here's how you're going to operate in order to allow you to fit into this neighborhood, hopefully in a way that's positive for everyone going forward. But you can't add to your student body until you prove to us that the representations that you've made about your traffic demand management plan are true, that we actually have that data. And I would also, I think Councilwoman Sayak sort of hinted at it, that she wanted there to be a universe of data. I would like to be included in any CUP that might be crafted, actually a condition that indicates that we are all agreeing that this is the data that we are using, so that we don't have the competing counts, that we don't have someone said the dozens of eyes or the whatever it might be, that we say this is the universe of data and we're collecting it in these ways, and we write that into the CUP. The CUP comes back for a check-in before anything else can go forward on the enrollment in 6 months, and then it comes back every year, which was a practice the Planning Commission used to have. Come back every year and we'll hear about how this is working. So I would not be in favor of waiting to get more perfect data. I don't even know what that might look like. I would rather try to craft something specific that we can then test in 6 months to see if those numbers make sense. That's what I would support. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to continue this for 6 months and go through more analysis. And I certainly want to try and wrap up, which for me is decades of working on this application one way or the other. So I am, in response to what the mayor said, I was not looking at 6 months. The information that I'm looking for exists. It's existed since June of 2014, and it exists as of right now. That information can be before the council, before its next meeting. So I don't want another 6 months either. I just don't feel comfortable with a data gap, as the mayor called it, crafting a CUP, because that CUP is going to have to eventually, once you get through the easy stuff like computer in real time and traffic counters, is going to have to go to a number. And that number should have the best available information. That information exists right now. The only thing is we don't have it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, before we go farther, because I've heard 2 people indicate that they have a difficulty with the data, existing data. I've heard a comment from Councilwoman Sayak that the data is, she's had trouble with the data. And I've had, I think, a pretty strong suggestion from the Vice Mayor that she thinks that what I'm calling the data gap could be filled in short order. Rather than us, I would ask the Vice Mayor if she has a motion with respect to the data that she is looking for, when she wants it back, and exactly what it would look like, and which meeting she would like it to come back at, before we go through the rigorous process of trying to craft a CUP with all of the details. If we are going to get a stop from, I'm hearing it from a couple of council members, then let's make that motion now, and if it gets a majority, so be it. If it doesn't, we'll continue down the path of crafting a CUP. So Vice Mayor, are you ready to do that?
I'm ready to listen to Mr. Leonardis because he had his hand up before mine.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I want to start out with a couple questions for staff. Supposing the town decided to collect data beginning March 1st all the way through, say, the end of August, 6 months, 24/7, how much would that cost?
We'd have to come back to you with that number.
Okay. The reason why I'm going down this road is because of Councilmember Spector's or Vice Mayor Spector's comments about there being a data gap, and when we get that data, who knows if we'll be able to use it or not. The school is currently in operation under their current CUP. They can continue to operate for the next 6 months. We can collect the data, and then we'll have what I would consider to be an unbiased set of data that's consistent. Not that, again, the data provided by the school or by the public is right or wrong, but there's different points of view surrounding that data. And I just think it would be wise if the town took the initiative, considering this this application to go forward that way, provided it's not overtly expensive. And again, I don't really think we're giving anything up. We have an application that's been approved by Planning Commission but appealed by both sides. So I've been told by administration of Hillbrook they're better under their current arrangement with the town than the Planning Commission's approval. So not necessarily throwing the whole thing out or starting over or whatever, but getting our own set of data and then applying those numbers moving forward so we can do a more complete analysis. That's what I would consider unbiased.
Okay, I'm going to look for any motion or questions or comments on the conversation that we're having now. Councilwoman Sayoc.
Just wanted to comment on this subject of data. I understand Councilman Leonardis's proposal to move us forward, and having us do the traffic count certainly would make it impartial. I am just very hesitant to use town resources to do another traffic count of traffic data that we know exists and that we can get if it would just be given to us. So I don't think, and I know these can range anywhere from 15 to 20,000 depending on the scope, and I just don't think it's fair to utilize town resources for a very specific application. Now I understand this has townwide concern and involvement, but we've had other applications where it has very serious ramifications, and we have made the applicant pay for that study. And so I understand the idea behind it, but I just don't feel comfortable using town resources to pay for it.
Okay, I'm going to start with Councilman Rennie because he hasn't talked for a while.
I'm having trouble understanding why we're asking for more data. To me, this just feels like kicking this down the road some more. You know, we've all seen this plot. This is data from the spring. I think there may be some irritation that they won't share more data with us. I think you can assume it's going to be better than this. But is this not a good enough form for data in a bar chart? And then if you're trying to use numbers to figure out what's the max, you know, how much you can squeeze them, for example, even the numbers that I got and provided to the council give you a lot of insight into that. Are we not, you know, since they were passed to us sort of, you know, from a speaker versus officially taken from a count, is that what's bothering us? I mean, there seems to be plenty of data. I'm lost here.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The data gap that I've referenced and other people have referenced is information that exists. And how it will impact what we already have, I don't know. It may be exactly like the spring of 2014. I don't know. But those of you out there, the hundreds of people who I've listened to and with whom I've spoken, you have had certain requests of the council, and I personally want to respond to those requests and weigh in on a motion that gives where I have the best information available to me. So I don't know where this is going to go. The mayor has suggested that I make a motion, so I'm going to move that Hillbrook provide the council with traffic counts from June of 2014 to the present, and that these traffic counts be provided to the town within the next 2 weeks.
This motion on the table, is there a second? Okay, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I wasn't going to second the motion, but I was going to make a suggestion based on the comments of Councilmember Sayoc and Councilmember Rennie. First, Councilmember Rennie, he said he wasn't sure if more data would help, but I think what it would help do is build a trust, and it would be a fair process. to do that. Addressing Councilmember Sayak's concern about who will pay for it and should we use town resources, I was going to suggest that we reach out to Hillbrook School and make them an offer. Do they want to give us the data from last June through February of this year, or do they want to pay for the town to count our own data? I think there were some concerns about their environmental impact report being non-valid if they provided the data to us. I remember that from discussions meeting with the Hillbrook administration. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, so that's not a second. I think I heard the motion as within the next 2 weeks, the motion is that Hillbrook will provide the council with existing data over the last 8 months. Would not involve any new traffic count is the motion, correct?
Correct.
Okay, given that, is there any second for that motion? And it's going to fail for lack of a second. Okay. So I think we're going to go back to trying to go through crafting or making a motion for a CUP. I have some pretty specific ideas, and I can try to do that. I've heard everybody's numbers and their concerns. I'll say why I would not have supported the Vice Mayor's motion, because I think it's important for us to go forward with a document. And I don't think it's a good use of town resources for us to count something that's been counted already and that Hillbrook has already paid for to be counted. So I would not have, well, I don't necessarily think that we have to collect that 8 months. I think that if we craft conditions and come back in 6 months and look at them, then we can decide whether there was invalidity or we needed additional data. That's kind of where I am. I wouldn't have supported Councilman Leonardis' idea. So lacking anything else, I'm just going to jump right in there and see what happens. So what I would, and this is not specific language. This is to be brought back, I'm hoping, with specific language, depending upon what the council decides to do with what I'm about to say. So I'm just going to kind of go through it in the format that the Planning Commission, the order, if you will, that the Planning Commission used, but not their format and not the chart, or what I'm calling the chart or the matrix. So, Ms. Fervetti, please don't put that up. I'm going to save the hard question for last. My motion, I'm making a motion, that Hillbrook would be allowed to operate as a educational institution for the academic year, which I would define as, I think we've said, mid-August through mid-June, between 7:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. during the academic year, as defined by a Hillbrook School academic calendar, that Hillbrook may extend those hours of operation up to 9 p.m. to include weekends no more than 10 times a year for special events, which is tied to a calendar. During the summer session, which would be defined again by Hillbrook calendar, which would be, help me out here, mid-June and end in mid-August. And I'm not seeing the time I had in mind on my notes, unfortunately. I think it was, I'm going to leave that alone, but I was, if I find it later, I'll say it, but it was going to be a limited hour of, I think it was 9 to 3. And if I find it, I will say what it was. The number of students, we'd say that Hillbrook may enroll 315 students each academic year, and half that number during the summer session. And it will verify that by posting those numbers on a website accessible to any member of the public, and which is also the numbers that are posted and contained in the affidavit it has to submit to the California Board of Education. And again, I'm looking for, when I make these proposals, I'm looking for things that can be verified outside of something that we're writing specifically for this, so that this can be easily interpreted and verified, and that there's accountability. In order to get the check in, I would propose that Hillbrook may not enroll more than a total of 99 students over the life of the conditional use permit, and it may not begin to, and it will enroll 33 students in each of the years 2016 to 2017, 2017 to 2018, and 2018 to 2019. And there is gap, there's a time gap. And that gap is to allow there to be a review, a 6-month review, so that if in 6 months, Hillbrook proves that it's in compliance after a public hearing with all the conditions that are contained in any kind of conditional use application, it would get, presumably, if it behaved and complied, which it assures the council and the town that it can, have the ability to enroll new students at the beginning of the 2016 school year. And any increase in the number of students would be completely within the discretion of the deciding body after a public hearing, which I'm going to describe later. But I would imagine that it would take place 6 months in the initial 6 months, the initial year, and annually thereafter. Before I get to my number on the traffic, I'm going to say that there should be a mandatory traffic demand management plan, which will, and I thank you, Hillbrook, for submitting that, but I would not propose that we use the Hillbrook plan. I would propose that we use a plan that we develop ourselves. That the plan will include any of the following means to limit daily vehicle trips: carpools, busing, shuttle or traditional school buses, bicycling, walking management plans. Other methods submitted by Hillbrook School for approval by the town of Los Gatos. I would, and here's why I may fail here, include the use of the Ann Arbor Emergency Access Road Gate in that traffic demand management plan, provided that there is a focused study as required under CEQA, and also provided that any change in the use come back after that focus study for either the 6-month review or the year review before any change to that the Ann Arbor Gate is made. That is part of the traffic demand management plan that Hillbrook will tell anyone, persons or entities covered by the plan, that pickups and drop-offs on the public streets in the immediate vicinity of Hillbrook are not allowed. That Hillbrook is solely responsible for the enforcement of its traffic demand management plan. That goes to students, parents, faculty, visitors, deliveries, staff, music, visiting sports teams, whatever it may be. That Hillbrook is ultimately responsible for compliance with that plan. That Hillbrook can continue to use as bus stops places that it has negotiated with private businesses, and that with respect to any other proposed bus stop, that it be approved by the Parks and Public Works Department of the town of Los Gatos as a suitable and safe place for a bus stop. Hillbrook will monitor its compliance with both the embedded counter that it already has and a tube counter as a backup. Okay, I'm just gonna keep on going. I would make the data that is described in the traffic demand management plan be the universe of data for deciding whether Hillbrook has complied with its traffic requirements or not. All the parking shall be accommodated on site. The pickup and drop-off areas should remain the same. I would use our town code for curfews and noise disturbances to address noise issues. But I would allow Hillbrook to have amplified noise or exceed those noise limitations for a maximum of 4 events per year if it's necessary for the adequate and effective conduct of the event. At the Hillbrook graduation wouldn't require a special permit because it happens every year and it's been happening for however long it's been happening. Very important to me is that we include in any CUP a compliance review. So in the first year after any conditional use permit adopted by the council is approved, there shall be a review biannually after 6 months and again after 6 months. Then upon a finding that Hillbrook is in compliance with the CUP, it shall remain in effect until the next review, which would be annually. If there's a finding that Hillbrook is in violation, or upon receipt of information that new or more effective data collection methods are available, then the CUP could be modified. Or obviously, if there's a notification of an alleged violation or some improvement that could be made. I would propose that there be a fine for whatever traffic condition is approved. That would be, and this is just trying to get numbers that are predictable and reasonable, $5,000 for any quarterly period, which I would call August through October, beginning with the academic year, and then going around. For $5,000 for any quarter and up to $20,000 for any year. The fines would be paid to the town of Los Gatos for use, traffic, safety, and other improvements in the immediate Hillbrook area. And the town would reserve the right to deny any increase in enrollment if there was a finding at one of those annual reviews or 6-month reviews that Hillbrook was in violation of any of the conditions of the CUP. And then I'll get to the big one, my proposal regarding the numbers, which is I would like my motion would include an 880 maximum that is cut in half in the summer to 440, but that sorry. The maximum would be tied to an academic calendar that Hillbrook could extend its hours for up to 10 times a year. Those are the hours exceptions. For the traffic, that daily traffic trip maximum that I'm proposing in my motion for the academic year could be increased by 10 trips on days designated by Hillbrook on a calendar that's posted on a website for the purpose of identifying days on which daily traffic trips might increase due to, for example, open house, parent-teacher night, sports events, etc. In no event may days that are so designated exceed 4 in any given month. So the theory with that proposal is that even though there is a maximum, Hillbrook would be able to carve out up to 4 days a month, 10 trips, or 10 days, where they had an exception to that maximum based on knowable and predictable events occurring at the school. And I am going to stop there and wait for my fellow council people to pick that apart. Comments, questions, a second on the motion? Discussion. Commissioner Sayoc, Commissioner. Ms. Sayoc.
If I may, a couple of questions, and then it might have to go through you to staff, though. Okay, and bear with me as I go through the notes that I just scribbled. For I'm sorry. For the Do we have traffic demand management plans in place with other institutions that we have a template that we can work from? Or are these fluid that changes with each application?
Typically, they are tailored to the use, but I'll also defer to our Director of Parks and Public Works.
Jesse Boo, traffic engineer. Most of the project-related TDMs were voluntary, and they are different for each case.
And then if I may, another question. Again, this is probably to staff. The environmental impact report, that's one component of what we need to do tonight. If we find that there is the Ann Arbor Gate, it was not studied. So legally, before any changes were to take place, that study has to occur. Is that correct? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And my understanding is it was not done to begin with because it was not in the scope of the applicant's preference.
It was not part of the project description. That's correct.
So moving forward, can we make them review this, or is this just an option that would be available to them as they're looking at their traffic demand management plan?
So one of the items before you this evening, as the council member correctly identified, is certification of the environmental impact report. So that is one of the items should the use permit move forward. If there's a desire of the council to study the possibility of Ann Arbor with the parameters, for example, as outlined by the mayor, that could be a subsequent step. And then additional environmental clearance would need to be done accordingly.
Okay, so a follow-up to that is, if we wanted to approve the EIR as is, and then through future discussion, they wanted to look at more focus studies, does that delay the environmental clearance tonight, or could we approve it as is, and then if further studies were to be happening, that could happen under a separate, almost like an application or a separate study?
That's correct. So what would happen, again, depending on your own deliberations, is that the council could choose to certify the existing environmental impact report as identified tonight. Then as you're working through the conditions, if you ask the school to consider options for pedestrian access and bicycle access through Ann Arbor Gate, we would need to do the necessary environmental clearance that would be associated with that. So they would not be able to use the gate yet, but they could study it, identify how they would propose to use it, whether it's students only, faculty, et cetera, perhaps using some of the same parameters as just outlined, such as no drop-offs on the public streets. So we would need to know what is the project that we would need to study under CEQA. It might be a supplement or an addendum to the existing EIR, and it would need to go through the typical public hearing process.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Rennie.
So I think I have lots of questions actually for you. You want the easy ones or the hard ones?
Ask me anything, as they say on Reddit.
So you said time of use was 7:30 to 6, I believe, and that is for students only, or does that include teachers? I believe we should have a time earlier for teachers. In fact, you want to get them on campus, I think, before the rush really begins.
My motion was a universe of hours for all users.
Would you entertain a change to allow teachers to come on campus at 7 or 6:30?
I think I would not at this point, just because I want to see where this motion goes, and if someone wants to propose something else, I'm ready to hear that.
Okay. I'm worried that now that's not even the way it's working, that they're there before 7:30 when the regular traffic starts. So you're, I'll just make my comment and move on.
Okay.
That, you know, there's 74 teachers that have to come in, so you're already making a really bad drop-off period worse by forcing the teachers into that drop-off period. So I'll move on anyway. So my next question was, so summertime, you said 9 to 3, and you gave mid-June to mid-August. I think that we might want to cut it back to 8 weeks.
Actually, let me, now that I'm looking at this, I'm looking at my notes and I'm not seeing the time, so I'm interested in what people think about what the time should be. I do look at my notes and see that I'm thinking about 6 contiguous weeks.
Okay, I was thinking 8. I think 10 is what they do now. I might be willing to go with 6, but I would prefer 8. So I'll write 6 in my notes for now.
Okay. And I'll write 8 in mine.
Okay. You had talked about the student cap at half of 315 for the summer. Does that change when they increase?
I think the 315 is what they're asking for.
Well, so how many students during the summer is the cap?
Half of their total enrollment.
And as that enrollment increases, that increases during the summer also?
Right, but I think the 315 number, if I'm not mistaken, but I probably am, so correct me if I'm wrong, is the number that they're ultimately asking for?
No?
They're asking
okay. For 414?
Sorry.
You did say 315,
Don't panic.
that's what I wrote down.
315, yes, and they can add no more than a total of 99. The intention is that the summer is half the academic year. That's the intent of the motion.
Okay, so also maybe I'd like to understand a little more why we don't trust their TDM plan and want to make our own. To me, I think in terms of, we want to give Hillbrook the maximum space to be creative to solve this problem versus hemming them in. I believe you said they would have the option of asking to add things to the plan.
Got to look at my notes again. And in the interest of transparency, which I've been preaching here tonight, I will tell you that one of the reasons that I would prefer that the council not accept the TDM plan that's proposed and given to us by Hillbrook is in the interest of building trust so that the council can craft its own plan or look at a plan that's proposed. That I think that what I'm looking for in a CUP are parameters. So I think that my notes are indicating that Hillbrook would develop and implement a mandatory traffic demand management plan. Okay, maybe that's what they have, but I wouldn't want to have that contained as the CUP for the town because I'd want us to have some flexibility if that should change. And so I would rather that the CUP set forth the fact that there will be a plan, that it will contain various things, that it will be monitored in this fashion. If Hillbrook chooses to do it in the fashion that they have indicated, that's fine. But I think that, for example, one of the things on their plan is, number one, it's an average, which I'm not proposing. Number two, it's counting a on-campus, off-campus. I guess, it's counting it as 2 trips. But in any event, it's assumed stuff that I shouldn't say that. It assumes things that the council may not want to ultimately put in a CUP, and by attaching a plan that may be obsolete 6 months from now or not be able to change, I think that that would not be wise going forward as a CUP. So that's why I would not want to adopt what they've submitted.
Okay. So next, moving down your list, on the Ann Arbor Gate, to me that it'd be very difficult to convince me that that's a good idea. I've heard a lot of discussion or proposals, open it for walking. To me, that looks like it's less safe than letting them walk up Marchmont, certainly from what, I realize that was the reason to open it is so that students wouldn't walk up Marchmont, but the drop-offs, it was suggested you wouldn't drop off in Ann Arbor or Woolen. That's going to happen. More traffic's going to occur there. If they don't drop off there, they're dropping off on Shannon. If you look at the map of where most of the kids live that could do walking, they're all on the other side, so they'd come up Marchmont anyway. So I'm having trouble with what the point is for opening the gate. If we really open it up to parents coming in or dropping off in that neighborhood, then we certainly, if you think of it in terms of the tire index, you certainly have a huge effect on the neighborhood, and it's definitely going to be felt for that reason. So I'm not very in favor of opening the Ann Arbor gate. You probably don't need to respond to that. But
I will. Okay. Just very briefly. The point of what my motion contains about that is that let's do the study to figure out what the impacts are. We haven't done it. And let's open it as not open the gate, but let's create the possibility that there may be a time when there could be a reasonable manner to open that gate. Right now, we have a prohibition. So in going forward, what I'm trying to do is have some things be mandatory, but some things that maybe could have some flexibility be at least considered, because I'm a fan of considering information. So I think we should at least get the information. We don't have it, and then consider it at a 6-month or 1-year review. That's why my motion is the way it is.
So your motion is not to open the gate, but to study opening the gate?
Correct.
I'm okay with that. So I think I wanted to ask about the fines. You talked about $5,000 per quarter. Is that it doesn't matter how far over they go? It's $5,000, or is it $5,000 per car over kind of thing?
My proposal in the motion and my thought is that it's a $5,000 figure per quarter. I know the Planning Commission did it differently, but in lots of my discussions with Hillbrook and other people, and being at one point in my life a school mom, there is going to be the time when your child is sick or your child is injured and you need to go there. And I think it's a bit unreasonable to say that one trip, if we're setting a maximum, that one trip over creates a financial burden that's unreasonable. So it seemed to me that if there was going to be flexibility based on a calendar or exception days, if there was a maximum, that there should be some certainty, if you will, in the amount of fine.
Okay, so if I move on, I'm not sure I completely understood your car count. You said 880 maximum. They could have 10 planned exceptions a year, back to school night, so forth. Then you said something about they could choose 4 days where they could add 10 trips. Is that it?
No, sorry. They could choose 10 days, I think it was, over the calendar year, but no more than 4 in a month.
So that refers only to those exceptions.
Right. The other 10 days that you were, I think, maybe talking about, and I know it's confusing, was a proposal to allow them to be open later on certain days that they designated under their calendar.
Okay. So this is not a question, I guess, but I'm concerned about 880 maximum is not going to be a number that they can achieve. One of the, I think you stated one of your goals is let's make a CUP that's transparent and works, and we don't want to set them up for failure. I'm worried that an 880 is probably 880 maximum is probably setting them up for failure. Certainly, if they start adding students, we did have one. The one data from the June showed there would be days that they were already over. I realize they only get fined $5,000, but still, we don't want to set them up to be failing every quarter. If you want to go with a maximum, I think it would be more appropriate to do a maximum around 960, or possibly you could do something like 75% of the days have to be an 880 maximum, and the other 25 could be a 960 maximum kind of thing. My concern is not every day is controllable. And if you look at the we'll call it a spreadsheet table or table of numbers that I included, there's a lot of other things that go on during the day they can't control. You know, deliveries, staff going out, parents having to come to pick up. It feels to me like most of the time the parents are doing the demand management kinds of things. But there's certainly going to be exceptions when people need to come onto campus. I think if you do the 880, they're probably never going to be able to do anything in the afternoon that's, you know, where parents come see their kids play in a sport or anything like that. So I'm thinking 880 is too tight, but there's other options we could look at.
So if that's a request to change the motion, I respectfully reject it, if you will. That's the reason for the 6-month delay, is to see, can they meet it? Certainly in a lot of the meetings that I've had with Hillbrook representatives, I think they're confident in their traffic demand management plan. I think it is important for them and the parents to be able to have access to the school. I also think it's important to the neighborhood for there to be predictability. I don't want to micromanage in this motion Hillbrook, but I do think that their calendar is predictable. And if we check it in 6 months and it's clear that they can't do it, well, then that's interesting, because many of the neighbors say, you know, we're telling you they can't do it too, so why don't we have that period where we see if that demand management plan works or not, and then the Planning Commission determines whether or not it's appropriate, given the CUP that's in place, to modify it, change it, whatever it may be. So that's why I'm kind of looking at these built-in reviews, if you will, to see if that's going to work. But so I understand your argument, and I understand your numbers, and I understand Hillbrook's argument and numbers, but my motion is going to be an 880 maximum.
So let me add one last question, and then I think Councilwoman Sayak would like to jump in. So if we put an 880 maximum and we see in 6 months they can make that, but they barely make that, are we then going to change it so they can add students?
The proposal I'm making in the CUP is if they comply with the conditions, that they can add 33 students. So the short answer is yes.
But then they may fail the maximum after they add 33.
Then we'll find out 6 months later whether they could do it or not.
Okay, I'll yield the floor.
Okay, Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. I'll do the same thing as what Councilman Rennie did. Just go through your notes. First, with hours of operation, I'm in agreement with 7:30 to 6. I do see perhaps some merit of allowing teachers prior. That's something that we can discuss further. But right now, as an educational institution, I think 7:30 to 6 is fair, with the exceptions of the 10 special events that we discussed. I do think that we need to look at limiting and cutting in half the summer session, half of the student enrollment as well as half of the traffic. I like that concept. With regard to summer session, I had actually wrote down immediately 6 contiguous weeks. I know that with summer sessions, and one of the concerns hearing from the neighborhood is that let's try and define that as well. So I highlighted 6 contiguous weeks as well for that. With the mandatory traffic demand management plan, and I'm going to tie it with the maximum of traffic, one of the thoughts that I had was if there was any flexibility in allowing Hillbrook to dictate what that is. If we had an 880 max, one of the things that I'm thinking in my mind is whether that management plan is coming from us or coming from them, as long as we're meeting the maximum traffic, should that be sufficient? Because one of the things I'm hearing in this discussion is there could be a variety of means to meeting and controlling traffic. And what I don't want to inhibit is any further ideas the school may have that they'd like to include, but because we have kind of limited the plan, they don't have that option. So that's something that I throw to you as a possible consideration. I like the idea of 2 separate counters, and those being the specific data moving forward that we would rely on for looking at compliance and non-compliance. I do think that we do need these check-ins, and that any changes to the CUP has to actually happen at a public hearing, Planning Commission, preferably, and that includes the additional students. I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we don't have any vested rights in this, and so that on an annual basis, they come back, they show we've been in compliance, and then the Planning Commission then awards the additional students. So. And with regard to the fines, one of the things that I had indicated I'd like is during this check-in period, during this year, that we not impose any fines to see and fine-tune whether or not we can actually get a plan that works, not only for Hillbrook, but for the town.
Okay, so there's a motion out there, but there's no second. There's comments and there's questions. Other comments or questions or second? Because if there's no second, it's going to fail for lack of a second.
Well, okay, so would you be willing to, with the traffic demand management plan, if we had that so that it would be Hillbrook defined as long as they meet the maximum 880?
I am okay with having it be Hillbrook defined. I guess I'm not being specific. The problem I would have is attaching any particular traffic demand management plan to a CUP that the town has, because 6 months from now that may make no sense. So I'm fine with saying Hillbrook is going to develop and implement a plan that it's responsible for, that it has to be accountable for, but what I don't want to do is put something that says, and see attachment A, that's what we got tonight. I would rather have that be a continuing flexible item that can be reviewed. So I'm fine with Hillbrook giving it to us. I don't, but what I want to do is to define the parameters of that, but not attach a particular document, which then we end up getting stuck with, and a council 14 years from now looks at it and says, what were they thinking?
Okay. Okay, so then question.
So yes is the answer to your question, and but I'm also explaining why I don't want the document that's been provided as the desk item.
I see. Okay. As the
So yes, Hillbrook, in the answer to your question, if that's in anticipation of figuring out whether you'll second or not, yes, Hillbrook can submit that traffic demand management plan per the conditional use permit, but I do not want to attach any particular document.
To this CUP?
To this CUP, yes.
Okay. And one last question, and then I think I will be in a better situation to second or not second. One of the items that was just discussed was Ann Arbor. And understanding that that was not Hillbrook's preference or even part of their application, and understanding that that's something not studied, could we just, is it possible to just take it out of this CUP? I don't know if I'm going to ask that to you or to our town attorney, so that if they decided they wanted to study it, sure, information's great, but I don't want to dictate that that be a parameter of their traffic demand management plan.
And let me have Mr. Schultz maybe tell us, are there any implications for us putting it in, taking it out, etc.?
If you put it in as a condition, that means they would have to study that and come back at a later date with that study for you to make determination what the next steps would be. If you don't put it in there, then it wouldn't be a requirement.
If I could clarify it. So right now, in the existing CUP, there's mention of Ann Arbor as an emergency access. Can we just take out Ann Arbor mention?
You can take it out completely if you wanted to. You can leave it as an emergency. I think that the motion that's on the floor is, though, that the applicant would be required to do a study on opening and what the impacts of that would be, and bring back that study at a later date, whatever time frame.
So let me understand then, Councilwoman Sayoc, is what you're suggesting that the motion be amended, changed to simply remove any reference to Ann Arbor whatsoever?
What I'd like to do is I'd like to reach a traffic number, and then as long as they meet that number, they have the ability within their own traffic demand management plan to look at what options are available to them, whether it's busing, whether it's walking, whether it's carpooling, whether it's the gate. But I want that to be something that they look at versus, and something that they as a school decide works for them versus us listing in the CUP, these are the ways to meet it. My concern is managing the traffic, but not necessarily the ways to manage the traffic.
Okay, so before I decide whether to incorporate that suggestion, I have a question for Mr. Schultz. If the council were to decide to remove the reference to Ann Arbor from the CUP, so there's nothing in there, there's nothing about emergency access, nothing. Does Ann Arbor then have any protection? Does the town have any protection for its right-of-way? I mean, how does it work if you just simply don't mention it?
Then there wouldn't be any access at all, even in emergency situations, unless they contacted us first, because that 1 foot strip we still own and would still dictate. So even without that language in there, they couldn't, if you're what you're referring to, could they then just open up the gate on their own? No, because we have that 1 foot strip that we own. So they wouldn't be able to open it up without our permission.
Okay, so if we remove the reference to Ann Arbor, we eliminate that as an emergency access?
Yes.
Okay, so I would not want to do that. But I think that the intent of my motion was to allow there to be, not require, but allow there to be a focused study regarding use of the Ann Arbor Gate, which could come back at what I'm proposing to be a 6-month review. And if there were a meeting of the minds, or if Hillbrook decided to pursue that, they could. But it would, I don't contemplate it as being a requirement. I contemplate it as being an option.
An option that Hillbrook could pursue when looking at different options and managing their traffic.
Which would then be the subject of either a 6-month review, an annual review, or no review if they chose not to pursue it at all. So I wanted to open that as an option in the motion.
Okay. I think I would like to second the motion with the understanding that we're not requiring any specific traffic management plan. We're encouraging a plan that is fluid, that Hillbrook would then use to decide on their own how to meet their traffic goals. So
that's the intent of the motion.
Then that, I would second the motion.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Other questions, discussion on the motion that's on the table? Councilman Rennie.
As I think about this, I guess I'm going to have to vote no when this comes up to a vote. I really think that the 880 max is setting them up to fail. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the numbers. I think if they work really hard with their current student count, they may be able to stay under 880 max. You know, there's just days you can't control. So really what you're saying is, you know, you can't add students because there's no way they're going to add students and stay under the 880 max. So if I was Mark Silver, I'd say, no, I'm going to stick with my current CUP. I'm not going to take this. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. I think we're setting them up to fail. If they take it, I think you're going to be squeezing them. There's going to be cheating. I don't want to set them up for people to be tempted to cheat. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Other comments? Vice Mayor Spector.
Question of staff, Ms. Trivedi, or the maker of the motion. There was a provision in the proposed motion that increased students 33 in, I think the statement was in 2016. And so what is that? Is that 15-16 or 16-17?
16-17 was
the
what
maker of the
we
motion
heard.
is 16-17.
All right, thank you.
Other comments on the motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I was wondering if we could, I was walking the neighborhood and listening to the testimony of the neighbors as well as the Hillbrook parents. There was concerns about parking along Marchmont, and was wondering if we can include perhaps something in your motion that addresses the Transportation and Parking Commission to evaluate during peak times, drop-off and pickup, whether there should be cars to be allowed parked along Marchmont. Considering their emphasis is on biking, walking, busing, and those things, it warrants cars not being parked along that access route. Some other concerns I had was the definition of who will the enrollees be. The first CUP, I think the intent was that it was going to be Hillbrook students enrolled during the summer, and then we had an interpretation hearing of the CUP, I don't know, a year and a half ago, where we determined that it could be 315 entirely different students. Now we are saying half of the enrollment is that is going to summer school. We're not specifying whether those have to be Hillbrook students or entirely 200, potentially up to 207 entirely different students. I was concerned, and this goes back to the Long Meadow neighbors, the hours of operation, especially for Saturdays, Sundays, holidays. I believe we should incorporate something into the CUP that there shouldn't be any operations on Saturday, Sunday, or holidays, and not past 4 p.m. on Saturdays. And I want to thank you for your thorough detail on everything else, as well as the other council members for their input.
Councilman Leonardis, are you proposing the issues that you mentioned as possible amendments to the motion?
Yes. It's interesting because we're here and we're trying to go about it one way or the other, and it sounds like we're kind of essentially drafting a CUP here on the spot. And if I were going to do that, I mean, I'm sure there are many other things that were raised by the community, and I just can't think of those, but I'm trying to think of some things that have come to mind looking at my notes that were of particular interest to the surrounding neighbors, and incorporate those into this motion, because I feel like this could possibly be the last chance to do this.
I doubt that. With respect to the proposal regarding the parking prohibition, and of course this goes to the seconder as well of the motion, I would not want to incorporate that because the town has a program for going through the parking commission in the town for any parking prohibition or permit parkings. So in keeping with the one of the themes of my motion is to use town code or town policies that exist where possible and incorporate them into any CUP. It makes sense to me to incorporate or have the any consideration for parking on Marchmont go through that same town process, so that if the people on Marchmont wanted to look at that process, petition the town for permit parking, there is a way to do that. So I wouldn't necessarily want to put something above and beyond or different than what's in our town code and policy about that. So I would not want to include that as part of my motion, but I'll look to the seconder to see what her thoughts are.
Listening to different neighborhood concerns on this, my understanding for the parking program is that it requires a certain percentage of neighborhoods to agree, And I actually don't know whether that percentage has been met. I don't know if enough neighbors want permit parking for that. I like utilizing existing policies. I wouldn't preclude it, but I wouldn't necessarily want to write it in and then have that be an option to neighbors should they want to pursue that next.
All right, so I'm hearing the maker of the motion and the seconder saying that they do not want to include that in the motion, so that would not be contained there. I had a question regarding your no operation Saturday, Sunday, holidays, not past 4 p.m. Is that academic year, summer school? What is that?
It would be year-round.
Okay, I would not be willing to do that because there are events that are predictable. When I met with the Longmeadow neighbors, what I really heard was that there are noise impacts that are created in the summer or by special events or additional events, and that really what they were looking for was some predictability in that so that they could manage their lives around that. And so what I would want to create in this CUP is predictability, but not a prohibition on that use. So I would not want to incorporate that. Seconder?
I just need more clarification because right now their existing CUP gives them 10 times a year for special events that extends the hours of operation. Are we looking at beyond that?
My understanding of what Councilman Liam Menardis proposed was no operation on Saturday, Sunday, holidays, or past 4 p.m. Is that correct?
I said Saturdays they can operate, but not past 4 p.m., and then no operations on Sundays and holidays. That would be year-round.
I still would not want to incorporate that in the motion.
I thought the 10 exception days covered that. If I'm, so I guess I would be in agreement that no, the 10 exception, as long as we have the 10 exception days, we're covered, right? For those weekend events and those hours beyond?
The motion had 10 exception days.
Okay. And I'd like to keep with the 10.
Okay. All right, so again, the motion is staying the same. With respect to who can participate in summer school, Hillbrook enrollment, the proposal was that Hillbrook could enroll 315 and that they meet the conditions 99 more over a period of time, that during the summer, half that number could attend summer school. The way that I would think that a CUP would read would be that it's implied that if I say Hillbrook may enroll X number of students and half that number for each summer session, that it's a Hillbrook enrolled student. So to me, it's incorporated into that language, but that's just kind of how I'm thinking that a draft would look. So I wouldn't want to limit it further. Again, I don't want to have a list of activities, things, programs, whatever it may be. I would rather have a CUP that is trying to manage traffic, time, predictability, and be transparent so that a school program can operate whatever it may be that is the school is determining is best for its students' academic year and summer year as well. So I wouldn't want to try to make that language more specific. Seconder of the motion, where do you weigh in on that?
I'm trying to think of implementation moving forward, and if one of the key things is trying to simplify the monitoring, I don't know how we would even monitor that. So I guess that would be my question, other than the easiest thing to monitor is the number of students. And so following that umbrella, I would just limit it to the number of students, which is half of enrollment.
And that's the proposal in the motion that's on the table. Okay. All right, so other comments, questions? Councilman Rennie.
So I guess a few other things I thought of on the off chance that we change to a traffic number I think that's achievable. Some other points that I don't think we covered. Thinking in terms of maintenance, when is maintenance allowed? And, you know, when we think in terms of janitorial maintenance and then outdoor maintenance also, I think that was something, certainly outdoor was something that was a concern of the neighbors. Can it be done on the weekends? When can it be done? Janitorial maintenance, I think you said just 7:30 to 6 stop. Does that mean that Mark Silver has to be off the property at 6? And can there be janitors on cleaning inside, so forth?
Well, I think Mr. Silver is going to be in there cleaning. Probably not. I don't want to make it specific to any particular person. Again, my idea was when I was trying to outline the motion very broadly was that we use existing ordinances and policies, et cetera. So I referred to the leaf blower ordinance, which doesn't allow you using leaf blowers, which is a loud thing on Sundays. So what I understood from the Longmeadow neighbors was we don't want it to be loud, and so we don't want a leaf blower on Sunday. Well, we have an ordinance that says you can't do that in any event. So my concept was, let's make Hillbrook subject to the same rules that we have for everybody else in town. So that was the concept with that. The concept with the traffic demand management policy or plan was that I was trying to include any and all service people, employees, et cetera, for Hillbrook. So if I'm a janitor, if I'm a landscape person, if I'm whatever I am, a student, a parent, a teacher, I would be subject to that traffic demand management plan. So, you know, I would be coming in, going on. I would also be subject to the hours. So, yes, I think I'm losing track of my own motion, but I was trying to not carve out specifics, trying to make it easily enforceable and easily interpretable, subject to easy interpretation, because once I start carving out what the student looks like, when the maintenance can happen, when the janitor shows up, I start running the school, and as a town and a CUP, my goal in the motion would be for us not to do that, would be to look to other existing ordinances and policies and codes that we have, that we could just say, and Hillbrook, you have to obey this anyway, but by the way, it's in your CUP, is the concept.
So I guess I like your concept. So then how do you define the 7:30 to 6 that you started with? Is that just students and teachers hours? And does that include the weekends also?
My notes actually said Hillbrook may operate as an educational institution. And I guess that I include in that everything that you do at a school, including cleaning it up. So that's the concept. And you made a comment that something about the numbers, but we have a motion in a second, and it's by no means knowing what we're going. So please, if you disagree with it, simply vote no and propose something else, and we'll move forward. So right now we have a motion on the floor with a second. Other comments or questions? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been a comment made that we don't want to set the applicant up for failure. We want to set the applicant up for success. And I want to do that too. But I continue to have concerns about an applicant who's coming to the council and saying, give me something that I don't have now. Give me more than I have now. But at the same time, for whatever reason, refusing or neglecting to give us all of the traffic counts from June of 2014 to now. That to me is very troubling. And so it is impossible for me to know if I'm setting this applicant up for success or for failure with an 880 maximum. And once I don't know what that number should be, then all the other numbers that are associated with that, Summer, Ann Arbor, all of those other numbers are not definable. And so I'm not going to be supporting this motion. And maybe it's just the opposite of what Mr. Rennie was saying. I don't want to set the applicant up for failure either, but I want the applicant to be straightforward and honest with the council when the council makes its decision. And I understand the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion are saying, if there's any problems, we'll deal with these in 6 months or 1 year. I do understand that, but I also understand that the information that would satisfy me to make a motion is available right now. We don't need to wait 6 months, nor do we need to wait for 12 months.
Okay, any other comments or questions before I actually call this motion, just to see where it goes? And then depending upon what happens, I'll have some other comments for the audience. So let's just call the question. There is a motion on the table. I'm not going to summarize it again. Hopefully we've all got it decently before us. It's made by the mayor. It's seconded by Councilwoman Sayoc. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. There's 2. Mayor Jensen and Councilwoman Sayoc voting in favor and opposed.
No.
No.
And we have 3 opposed, Councilman Rennie, Councilman Leonardis, and Vice Mayor Spector. Before we move on, it's now 9:45. I usually give us a break at 9 or 9:30. I've already gone past. And I am going to issue an apology to those of you who have come and are sitting patiently on item 10, which is our police contract. I am going to look to the council and see whether we want to take an initiative now before our break to put that on another day. I, as the mayor, I would not endorse moving the plan development. We've moved that twice already. Those people have been more than patient. However, this is the first time that the discussion of the Los Gatos Montessorino police contract has come on our agenda, and we've had several requests to continue it in any event. So I'm going to look to the council and see what their preference is with respect to that before we take our break. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I would move that we agree to hear that on another night.
Okay, I have a motion to continue it. Is there a second? I'm sorry, Councilman Rennie, did you raise your pencil?
I wanted to comment.
Okay, make a comment, please.
So I understand it's getting late and we want to send them home. My concern is not so much the contract with Montessorino, but the implication we might also consider outsourcing to the sheriff. And my concern is that the public doesn't know what we're thinking on that. And by continuing it, it's going to just stew in the public for however long it takes until we get this on again, which I think could be kind of detrimental for our community. So I understand we're running out of time. Would love to fit it in, though, if we could.
Well, we have a motion on the table to continue. I will make the statement that I made at the outset, in case some of you weren't here, with respect to that item, is that the council action on that item, if any, tonight would relate solely to the contract. Any other input regarding that item would be informational only. And I will say, because I asked for the noticing on that item to be expanded, I asked for that because in thinking about a contract, amending a contract, revoking a contract, changing a contract, all kinds of things are going to come into play. And all of those are going to be financial. And so in order to allow the fullest and broadest conversation regarding what we were going to do with respect to that contract, I thought it was fair for the noticing to put that in. It has turned into a discussion that the council has made a decision on what to do with respect to our police department. The council has not. No one on the council has done that. What we're trying to do is get information. That said, we can certainly continue to receive input from those that are here tonight, but they would be just aware that it will be late. But we do have a motion from Councilman Leonardis. Is there any second on that motion to continue? If not, we'll take a break and soldier on. So we'll see you all at 10 o'clock. Floor. With respect to item 8, which failed, and now I am going to look to the council for other comments, other motions, other questions, other input. Councilman Leonardis.
Again, regarding the folks who came in this evening for the police thing, I was trying to articulate, I don't think we were going to get there before 11:30, and I would hate to see you all stay here this evening. In addition to a lot of the correspondence I received this week was asking for a continuation on this item, the letters and such that I received. So again, I don't know if I have the ability to make the motion again, but I would gladly make the motion again in the interest of not having everybody wait and then go home in an hour and a half, unless you wanted to stay and watch us talk about Hillbrook and then the PD ordinance. So.
Well, even though it's not about item 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was item 10.
That's okay.
I apologize, Mayor.
You can make the motion again, and we'll see where it goes. So,
well, I just wanted to add that comment. I made the motion once, so I'll just, if anybody else wants to comment on that on council.
Well, okay. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During the break, I also had the opportunity to think about Mr. Leonardis' motion, and with a little bit more thought, I happen to agree with him. So I'm going to move to continue agenda item 10. And before we consider whether or not I have a second or not, or what date that will be, let me explain that I was a member of the council ad hoc committee that worked on that contract between Montserrano and Los Gatos. That is the agenda item that is actually before us tonight. I think whether or not we go forward with our contract with Montserrano or they with us is an extremely important issue to our town. And I think that should be given, that specific issue should be given time and consideration. I am concerned that tonight there will not have enough time and that we won't have good consideration of that issue. So for that reason, I'm going to move to continue agenda item 10.
Okay, Vice Mayor Spector has made a motion to continue. Is there a second? Councilman Leonardis.
I will second the motion.
Okay, questions, comments on the motion? Councilman Rennie.
Okay, so I did go back and query the people that have been waiting, just so I understand what they want. And the consensus seems to be they've waited this long, they would like to say their piece. I don't think they believe we need to, and I don't think we need to actually make decisions on it, but as an option, we could hear testimony for the people that are here. I can't see how many cards you have and how long that would take, but it looks like almost an hour, I guess. So anyway, that's a suggestion that we might consider taking public testimony, but on the understanding we won't deliberate on it.
Other comments? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Given the importance of the Los Gatos Montessorino contract and the concern that I've heard within the past few days, I want to make sure that our minds are at top peak, and it's just the reality. As it gets later, our minds won't necessarily be as sharp, and I don't want us to sit through this meeting, the Hillbrook, and then we're going to have the plan development, which is pretty complex also, and then have 11:30 come and the meeting ends and people who waited till 11:30 not have that opportunity and further be frustrated. So I would actually support moving it to a date certain and advertising that so that those that are interested on this issue know that it will be on the agenda as early as we can make it.
Other comments or questions before I call the question? Okay, we have a motion to continue made by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilman Leonardis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? No. So it passes 3-2. Opposed are Mayor Jensen and Councilman Rennie.
Madam Mayor?
Now the question is, yes, Vice Mayor Spector.
Through the mayor, the staff, can we get a date certain?
The March 3rd meeting contains the continuation of the North 40 specific plan. One option for council consideration might be March 17th, given the tentative items.
I'm going to say that the police department probably doesn't want to come on St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Just giving some options. April 7th is another option. I know we may have an absence on the part of one of our council members, and that may be spring break for some of our schools. So that's some other data points to consider. April 21st is when we have some tentative discussion regarding Planning Commission policies and procedures, senior needs assessment, and strategic goals discussion. So there are some items that could be moved around, so April 21st may be the first viable date for your consideration.
So, Vice Mayor, in light of that, do you have a motion?
I'm going to defer to the staff and the mayor as far as the specific date.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we continue it to April 21st because Ms. Pravetti indicated that we are having strategic goals discussions on that date. And this item, Los Gatos Montessorino Police Contract, actually began as a strategic goal. So I think it's appropriate to continue it to that date. So the motion is to continue it to April 21st. Is there a second? Seconded by the Vice Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And before you leave, who are interested in item 10, I have all your cards. Thank you very much. We've read all your correspondence. We very much appreciate you being here tonight. I want you to know that the scheduling of this item is scheduled as with every other item that I've put on the agenda in good faith to finish. And you people from Hillbrook know that I always believe I'm going to finish. So I'm not thinking that I'm burying something at the end of an agenda. We're just not getting into it because we're trying to make sure that we're careful, that we hear everyone, that we get input on every item that we consider. And the Los Gatos Sereno Police Department contract is one of those items that's important. We hope that we'll see you again on April 21st, and we will be very much interested in what you have to say to us and the correspondence that you may want to give us between now and then. So thank you for your patience. We very much appreciate you being here. So April 21st, all of you who are interested. Now, item 8, Hillbrook. I'm going to let the room clear out. I'm going to ask you all to take your conversations outside so we can keep going on Hillbrook. Okay. So we had a motion on the floor. It was seconded and failed with respect to a proposed Hillbrook CUP. Do I have, thank you. Do I have any other motion, comments, questions, proposal on how to go forward? Councilman Rennie.
So I guess what I'd like to try to do is build on your motion, build on change, at least ask to change items that would allow me to vote for it, since I voted against it. As I mentioned before, I think the 880 maximum, the way we set it up, is a setup to fail. I would be willing to vote for it if you could leave it at 880 maximum, but instead give them 10 times exceptions that they set ahead of time, the evening events, but then also give them an additional 10 random days they choose to use as exceptions. So there'd be a total of 20 per year, but keeping the 880 maximum for all but 20 per year. I also feel pretty strongly about the times of day and when maintenance can get done. I'd like to see teachers be in at 7. It just doesn't make sense to me to stuff the teachers in when the rest of the traffic is on that street and the kids that live in that neighborhood are trying to leave. I'm okay with 6 for students, but I think that we should be allowing in the evening time for janitors, not outdoor maintenance, because we want it quiet for the Longmeadow neighbors, but we need to allow them to get the place clean at some point. They can't clean when the kids are there, and they currently clean every day. So we need to allow janitorial staff on, and I think some of the management shouldn't be running out the door at 6. I think current CUP or the proposed one said certain staff till 9:30. I don't think a few people on campus that are indoors are going to be an impact to the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Rennie. I can't tell if you are making an independent motion or you're wanting amendments to the failed motion, because that motion failed. So we would need a new motion. No, I don't want you to read all of it. I don't want you to read all of the notes about the failed motion, but I think that we need to have, I don't know, some more clarity on how your new motion would look, so that we can make it, so that people can make a decision about whether they want to support it or not. If you're willing to do that, that's great. Or if I have somebody else who's willing to make an alternate motion that maybe doesn't go into the full CUP or does something else, we would certainly entertain that as well. So before you start reading, let's see if there's other options out there on the table, because your comments are, Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'll start on the 2 comments and then see if I could possibly amend it and see if that could be a basis for a second. I'm flexible with the hours of operation for limit at 7:30 a.m. to 6 for school students, and give some flexibility to faculty, house cleaning, etc. I like the idea of additional max exception days. One of the things I'd like more information about are, would would those be 10 that are on the calendar that have already been negotiated, I guess, or discussed in advance? And is there a possibility to, one of the things that I heard listening to all of our comments was the data and the lack of data. So is there a possibility in the motion to request that we get the actual real-time data? I think the suggestion was within 2 weeks, and include that and have that come back in 2 weeks, as well as the more information on the 10 additional exception days.
Councilman Rennie.
So I'm hoping to get closer to finish tonight, so I don't really want to go get more data if I can avoid that part of it. In terms of the exception days, I'm thinking we have 10 days that are on the calendar like we do now, but we need to give them 10 more exception days that they can assign, or based on random factors, not ones that are on the calendar. You can't tell what days the flu is going to hit the school, and parents are going to have to, a lot of parents are going to have to come pick up instead of carpool or other things like that. I think the school can control certain things, like making sure they don't have Flag Day at the same time that they have some art exhibit that parents might come see. But there's a certain amount of uncontrollability, so we need to, we don't want to fine them for a rainy day or, kids sick a lot day kind of thing. So that's why I'm suggesting that, that give them free 10 days that they choose after the fact to remove it. So, or one way to look at it is it's an 880 max, 10 days that are chosen on the calendar, plus they can have 10 days that go over 880. And if you even want to make sure they're not ridiculous days, we could say those 10 days can't be over 960. I'm willing to change for those parameters.
Is that a motion? I'm trying to figure out where we're going here. What about, so I heard you say that you are opposed to Councilwoman Sayak's suggestion of collecting more data. I've heard you say you want 20, what I'm going to call exception days, 10 of those predictable, 10 of those random, that those exception days could have a further maximum of 960. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. I'm not, are you okay with
yes,
it? Is that
yes.
what your motion is?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
I will do that as a motion.
I'm just trying to make sure that I'm capturing what you're suggesting. And I think you were also suggesting a different time schedule for arrival, closure, etc.
So for the students, as Councilwoman Sayak said, 7:30 to 6, but allowing faculty to come in at 7 and allowing from 6 to 9 there be cleaning staff or management staff on campus.
Okay, so is that then your motion?
Yes, including
the what had gone before?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, I see no one. Fails for lack of a second. I'm going to try something, which is based on the comments that I've heard here tonight, and I originally had a lot of reluctance to do this, but I despair that it's 10:30 and that we have not advanced the ball very much. I am hearing at least 2 council members indicate that before they could really proceed, that they want additional data. I've heard at least one other person say additional data might be desirable. So I am going to propose, just so that we can move forward on this and have the benefit of any kind of other information that we'll get, not at a public hearing, but in written communication, which I know that you all are very good at, to, again, make the Vice Mayor's original motion to request that Hillbrook School provide the real-time data traffic counts from the 8-month period, and I'm hoping that the Vice Mayor will help me out with the particular dates. Can you help me with those for the motion?
June 2014 to the present.
Thank you. Incorporating that in my motion. request that data from Hillbrook to be supplied in 2 weeks to the council, and then for this matter to then come back before the council on, not on March 3rd, but on St. Patrick's Day. Sorry, everyone, because that's going to be our open meeting now, for consideration of that data and, again, consideration of Hillbrook's application for increased enrollment in CUP and certification of the EIR. So that is my motion.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So again, the motion is a request to Hillbrook School for that data from June 2014 to the present, which Hillbrook School may act as it wishes. But the matter is, the other part of the motion is that the matter is continued till March 17th. Again, we will not reopen the public hearing. However, we will be glad to accept your written communications, your whatever you might want to give us, your requests for meetings, additional or different information that you may want to supply. Thank you for your patience. I hope that at least you see that there's some thought being given to this, that the council is trying to reach something that we can go forward with. We appreciate your patience in being here tonight. Thank you very much. And we will move on to our next item as soon as you guys get up and leave, unless you're just dying to stay for the plan development discussion. Okay, at long last, plan development, which is item 9. Plan development overlay zone. Consider the Planning Commission's recommendations to the Town Council regarding the plan development overlay zone, and consider whether to adopt a resolution appointing a study committee or implement the Council Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation and adopt the proposed ordinance. Is there any staff report, Ms. Bravetti?
Yes, just very briefly, want to bring the full council up to speed on this issue. The plan development zone is something that is a tool in the planning toolkit. And for the town of Los Gatos, our town code specifically identifies that the plan development is really to be able to create an optimum quantity and use of open space and encourage good design. Over the past few years, there had been community concerns about its application, and as a result, in December of 2013, an ad hoc committee consisting of the vice mayor and mayor was composed, and that committee came up with draft ordinance considerations to strengthen the use of plan development within the town. Specifically, the recommendations were to narrow the purpose and intent of a plan development to protect and preserve hillsides, natural and historic resources, ridgelines, trees, creeks, riparian corridors, and open spaces. That second, PDs would be allowed on properties that meet one of 4 criteria. One is that the site would be within the boundaries of the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines area map, or 2, a site within the Landmark Historic Preservation Overlay Zone, or 3, a site that contains a tree or stand of trees that constitutes an important community resource, or for a site that contained a stream, channel, or creek that supported or could support riparian vegetation. And the last recommendation was to eliminate the existing minimum of 40,000 square feet. We brought this item to the Planning Commission per council direction, and the Planning Commission received testimony from the development community as well as our residents. And after that, they considered that their recommendation for the town council would be to create a new study committee to understand the problems with planned developments, to really examine the data with respect to the last few years of planned development approvals to see what the pattern would be of particular problems, and then consider some of the issues that the development community has raised. And so the commission gave you recommendations with respect to the specific makeup of a committee and the scope of that committee. So before you this evening, you have the option of either proceeding with the ad hoc committee recommendations to consider the Planning Commission's recommendations or to provide any additional guidance or policy direction to staff. I do want to point out that you did receive a staff report with correspondence from the building industry, and then today we had a desk item with a letter from Lee Quintana. And that concludes staff's report, and we're here to answer any questions and assist you in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pavetti. Are there questions? Okay, thank you. I'm going to then call on members of the public who would like to speak to us on this item. I'm counting more than 3 of you, but I only have 3 cards. So if you'd like to speak, you all know it. I'm looking out there and you know it. These little buff cards, you fill them out. Come on up, you have 3 minutes. Suzanne Yost.
Good evening, Mayor Jensen and council members. I'm here representing the Silicon Valley Association of Realtors. I am the local governmental relations chair for the Los Gatos Saratoga district of the Association of Realtors. And also Jessica Epstein would like to have been here tonight. She's our government affairs director, but she became ill, so we would have had 2 of us. We would like to encourage that the council adopt a resolution to appoint a study committee, that we feel that this issue deserves a measured response and that it needs a little further refinement before any adopting of specific items. I would also like to ask consideration of the council to be part of that study group, assuming that, or if it is implemented. I've been a realtor for over 35 years, and I'm an attorney, and I'm a resident of Los Gatos, so would be very interested in serving on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there's questions for you. Thanks very much. And should the council go in the direction that you're suggesting, I'm assuming that you are going to provide contact information.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Jeff Lockridge.
Hi, my name is Jeff Lockridge, 109 Paseo Laura. You guys probably know that by heart by now. I support the council's resolution to appoint a working committee to study the town's current plan development zoning ordinance. I would also support making the following changes to the study committee's composition. With 1 member being a land development construction experience, 1 member being with business experience, and 2 members who would be town residents. I think it's important that the town have some say in this matter, a little more say than what the existing definition of the working committee would be like. I think it says that they have to have either business experience or town residents. So I think 2 should be town residents because we have to live through it or live with it. I'd also like to suggest something for future plan developments. I'd like to see an affordable housing component attached to all planned developments moving forward. I know that's kind of strange, but the development would either have to build affordable housing as part of the development, or if not, then they would pay a fee into affordable housing fund. If a developer can't follow the general plan in order to build, and would need a PD to get the general plan changes necessary to develop, they should have to pay the town for this privilege. This would also be a revenue source for future affordable housing projects. I had thought that PDs were granted only to be able to produce a better product based on the unique characteristics of a particular site, not when the site is a rectangular and flat site. I had thought that the intent of a PD was not to intensify past what the original zoning would allow. Most PDs now, or at least since the adoption of the 2020 general plan, seem to have violated the spirit of the underlying zoning in regards to both density and intensity. Laurel Mews, Bluebird Lane, and the Wine Depot site come to mind. Planned developments should make sense, not just for the developer, but for our town. That's it.
Thank you. You have a question, Councilman Rennie.
I think it's a question for a combination of staff and Mr. Lockridge. So you suggested affordable housing in order to get a PD, but I think okay, so let's assume the PD was all commercial, then that would make sense. If it's housing, we already have to have, the PD is probably going to be large enough, well, maybe not, some percentage, 15 to 20% affordable housing already. So I assume if I'm correct, I'm assuming you're talking about adding on top of that?
Well, I would leave that up to council, but my suggestion is to make the town a better place if we have to give up something from the general plan to have a developer put a plan development through. If they can't get what they want through just rezoning, and they have to change our zoning, change what the general plan has stated for that area of town, then they should pay for that privilege. That's just a concept. That's just a thought of mine, that it seems that we don't have enough affordable housing. We're going to be, our feet are going to be held to the fire by the arena numbers and ABAG, every single housing element. And if we can make, I think that the people, actually, most people want affordable housing, real affordable housing. And if we can put something in motion that goes beyond our BMP program, I think that we'd be a better town for it. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockridge. Scott, I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm not even going to try. I'll let you say it.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Plautz.
I was going to get it wrong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, council members. I've provided a letter for you this evening as well. That was from November 4th desk copy that I wanted to make sure you had a copy of. First, I'd like to thank you for allowing the community to provide feedback. There's obviously a lot of very controversial discussions going on this topic right now. And thank you for allowing democracy to take place here. When I was at the meeting on October 8th, there were many community members who made verbal comments at that meeting. And the chair at the time, Margaret Smith, said that it is the democratic way. And I really think that's an important thing about this, is to keep the democracy tool in place here. And this PD is a tool and gives you the empowerment to make decisions that are right for our community. I think that's the most important element about this issue, the way that I see it. By taking the PD tool away, it actually takes democracy out of the equation, because this hits the points of what's happening in the town. There's been slightly over 70 PDs that have happened in the last 50 years. This includes our wonderful library right next door. It includes a lot of these wonderful communities, and though some people may not like the look of them, there are many happy families who reside in these communities, such as Bluebird Lane, some of the other places that are under, debate right now, Laurel Mews and other places such as that. These are very difficult and challenging plan developments to put in place, but I would myself like to just look back and say that there's some great things that have happened under the PD process. I think this is something where there's a few people who don't like a few of the recent PD developments, and I think there needs to be a little bit more research put into that, because I've spoke to many of the people in these developments, and they're very happy to be Los Gatos residents, and we're able to afford to live in our community because of those developments. So, with that in mind, I also support a study which was recommended from the Planning Commission, and myself, I would also be willing to volunteer to be part of that. I've lived in the Los Gatos and Los Gatos area. I'm a local resident. I'm currently not in town, but I'm a landowner. I own 16212 Los Gatos Boulevard, the Artisan Wine Depot, with my business partner. I'm a real estate developer, commercial and residential. And residential is where we're planning to move on this item because it's the least amount of traffic impact. So we're addressing what the CDAC has told us twice. So through that context, there's many more details I could go into, but obviously I'm down to my last 15 seconds. If I can be of any assistance to help through the process, I would just like to volunteer and make myself available if that can possibly help you through this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there's questions for you. Thank you. Lee Quintana.
Just want to, Lee Quintana, I just want to reiterate just a few points that I made in the desk item that I submitted. And one of those is that I think there is a connection between how PDs are used and how CUPs are being used. And I would urge you to consider adding that to the mission of the committee should you appoint it. Also, I think that there is more information that really needs to be supplied to be able to figure out if there has been a change in the way CUPs and PDs have been applied and when that change occurred, and also possibly determining the source of the reason for it to be a change. And I've listed some of those in my desk item. In addition to that, I did not comment specifically on what should be in PDs or anything of that sort, but I would like to make the comment that I don't think it's an issue of whether there should be PDs or there shouldn't be PDs. I think it's more an issue of how you implement them, what the requirements are, and especially that they not be used to either intensify what would normally be allowable, and they should not be used instead of a general plan amendment or a zoning change if the PD is inconsistent with the general plan or the underlying zoning. Thank you.
There's a question for you, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, thank you, Mayor Jensen. Ms. Quintana, in your in the Planning Commission notes, I was reading the transcript. You mentioned that you thought it would be beneficial to combine the PD process with the ANS process.
Yes.
Could you further explain your position so everyone who's watching on TV will be familiar with that?
Okay, two reasons. Number one, I think it's a matter of efficiency. You hold one hearing instead of having to go through two separate hearings. And number two, when you're approving a PD, even when you have the detailed ANS before you, what the town has been approving is just a series of conditions that it can be up to this or up to that, or there's flexibility. And then when you get to the actual ANS, conceptually you've already approved the ANS usually, and you're just looking at the details, so that the ANS, in a sense, should be the vehicle that sets the parameters of the standards in the PD. PD should be more specific, and the way we do it, it's more flexible so that if an applicant comes in for a modification to their ANS, as long as it fits within the parameters that are established in the PD, they can go ahead without doing an amendment. But that may change the project considerably. So it's both a matter of efficiency, a matter of letting the public know what they're really going to finally get, and thirdly, it's, I think, less frustrating for the Planning Commission, which has to have a second hearing but has very little flexibility in changing anything once they get the AMS application actually in front of them, as long as it falls within the broader definitions of what was established by the PD. Does that make sense? Do you understand?
Very much. Thank you for that.
Ms. Quintana, I actually have a question for you. You said that you thought more information was needed to look at how the application of PDs changed over the years, et cetera. What kind of specific information would you be looking at?
Okay, I looked at the list, and the list didn't really tell me what I wanted to know. It told me all the PDs that have been approved. It didn't tell me what the general plan was, what the underlying zoning was. It didn't tell me what was actually being approved. It didn't tell me what kind of concessions or flexibility involved in terms of the town's standards and regulations. It didn't tell me whether it was combining a use with an underlying use or it was supplementing a different use for the underlying use that wasn't consistent with the general plan designation. That type of information would allow you to see if there has been a change in the way the PD has been used in the respect of, is it being used to replace general plan amendments and zoning code map amendments?
Any other questions for Ms. Quintana? Thank you very much. Natalie Ladd.
Hi, I'm Natalie Ladd, and I am a resident in the Montecito Homes, which is the old Swanson Ford area. I'm in support of the ad hoc committee, and I just have one suggestion, if possible. I think if you are looking at possible candidates or residents, perhaps you should consider someone to either give input or be on the committee that may be very familiar as the resident with the affordable housing, the Project Sentinel, any renters, possible BMP owners, someone that's actually experienced and lived in an area that was zoned for commercial that is now resident. I think I personally in the last year have experienced many things, learned many things because I'm actually there day to day, and that might be something you might want to consider when you're selecting people.
A question from the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. What was being examined is, do we need to modify our plan development ordinance? So how is what you're saying fit into the issue, do we need to change our plan development ordinance?
I haven't followed everything with the plan development closely, but the few little things that I picked up about on what, for example, there's townhomes on Blossom Hill, and originally the fences were supposed to be 5 feet tall, and it got lowered to 3.5 feet. And my understanding is if residents wanted to put a trellis or put any privacy items there, they couldn't do it. It would have to be a brand new permit and consideration, and it has to be asked by the actual developer or the builder. That is the only small issue I saw, so I think that maybe some of that might be considered.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Ladd? Thanks very much. I see other people in the audience, but I'm out of cards. So I am going to close the public hearing and look to the council for any questions they might have of staff or any comments, discussion, motion. Don't all talk at once. Lots of studying happening up here, lots of studying. Councilwoman Sayoc.
Okay, couple comments, and then I could also turn it into a motion. I'm in support of an ad hoc committee. I think of the options before us is, do we create, well, first I'll focus on the process of how that is to happen. One of the options before us is, do we use...
Ms. Seja, I'm really sorry,
I'm
but
sorry.
let me make sure that we're clear as you go forward. When you say ad hoc committee, there was a council ad hoc committee, but I'm assuming that you're talking about a broader committee.
Correct. So
Okay.
what would be the right term for that? Like a newly created committee? Or?
There you go. That's
Okay.
fine.
So a newly created committee, this would have to go back to the general plan because of the changes to the general plan. So for efficiency, I would propose we add community members to the general plan composition. I like the idea of 2 town residents, a member with business experience, a member with land development construction experience. I think those are valuable insight that they could provide in how this ordinance should come forward.
Is that a comment or a motion?
That is a motion.
Okay. I might be prepared to second the motion, but I have a question for you. You are very familiar with the Housing Element Advisory Board, which was created in large part after study or discussion about the affordable housing overlay zones, which is a composite of general plan committee members, planning commission members, town council members, and then various representatives of different groups. Are you proposing something like that, or are you proposing the entire general plan plus some additional people? What would that be, a special session? I don't really understand how that would work with the general plan if we were focusing on plan developments.
I was envisioning the general plan with additional members that would look specifically at this. So I think it's quite similar to housing element. We notified, we added, I think, 3 town residents to the general plan composition, 4. And the general plan already had committee members as well as planning commission members as well as council members.
Okay, so I understand your motion, and given your explanation, I would be prepared to second the motion. I'm going to look to the other council members for questions, discussion on the motion, which is, I think, pretty clear, so I'm not going to restate it. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I have a question for staff. So there were some comments made by the public tonight. One was try to incorporate some more below market price type units into the plan development ordinance. The other was combining the ANS. Are those subjects that at this point in time, number one, I guess if this motion carries this evening, would be for the new committee to explore? Is that?
That's something certainly within the council's purview to determine the scope of the study. So whether you agree with all of the public comments or if it's should be more narrow to just the application of how you would like to see plan developments used in town. That's entirely up to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. The process that's now being described would by definition take more time than having this just come back to the council. So what is staff's thought or recommendation as to pending or future plan developments while this fairly long process takes place?
Thank you. We do have a number of plan developments pending in town. I can think of at least 4 just off the top of my head. My expectation is that those would be working through the process in parallel, and when they're ready for consideration before the Planning Commission and Council, they would be before you under the existing rules in our municipal code, so that they could run in parallel. I think the other issue, just in terms of a workload, since we are still working on the housing element, I don't anticipate that planning staff would have the capacity to start up with the general plan committee and the additional members until we've had some closure on the housing element. And I'm just thinking about the GPC, the General Plan Committee itself, that they would probably want to complete their housing element work before starting in on the plan development. So that's a factor for time as well.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Rennie.
So I'd say generally I like the motion. It really just talks about a composition instead of what we're trying to achieve with it. I guess that's sort of relevant or evident, self-evident, already mouth not working. For me, when I think through it, I'm certainly less sophisticated than those that have been on the Planning Commission for a long time in the council. You know, so one of the things I would want to see would be, you know, I think Ms. Quintana sort of stated it the same way, but a little bit differently. I'd want to see for all the different plan developments, what would they have looked like if they didn't have a plan development and they had to follow the general plan rules and so forth. I think she stated it as what was the general plan at the time and how was it different. I think it's sort of the same kinds of things. So that would be interesting to me to be able to go back and study, you know, what would we have gotten instead of if we didn't have the plan development. She certainly talked about, well, it looks like we've changed the way we're using plan developments over time. I agree that would be interesting also to see how it's changing, and maybe we can change some of the wording to get it back to where it should be, if assuming we think it's not where it should be. So those are my thoughts for now.
Other comments or questions on the motion? I actually have a question for Ms. Pavetti. If the council were to vote in favor of the motion, I am assuming, perhaps incorrectly, that then the committee or the staff or whoever it might be would direct the scope of the discussion of the committee. But if I'm not correct and that the council needs to do that as part of a motion, I would like to hear that.
Staff would definitely defer to the council. I think if you don't provide us a scope, then we would basically use these materials that are before us. The ad hoc committee, the council ad hoc committee work, I think is still useful and informative to the study committee, the correspondence, and all of the other testimony that's been heard. So that would be our starting point. But again, as I mentioned before, the council could certainly articulate a more specific scope for this work effort, especially if there are particular outcomes or goals that you would like, or questions that you would like us to answer.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the maker of the motion if she wants to incorporate just summarize what's been already said about what should be incorporated in the study as part of her motion, or wants to add or subtract any of those items.
Okay. In general, I'd like to make this as a broad a discussion as possible. We have the opportunity to really look at plan developments, the history of it, as well as being utilized. And I think having the opportunity to create a committee that could look into past examples, the changes as is specified, the efficiency suggestions that we've heard today, I think would be appreciated. Those specific things that I heard were efficiencies of combining CUPs with ANS. I've also heard PDs and ANS. I've also heard discussion about what are the connections between CUPs and PDs, specifically how that relates to where the general plan and the existing zoning is, examples of how they've been used and what it would have looked like if it weren't. I know for myself, I'd like to have the group look at perhaps are there specific findings that we might want to incorporate as we move forward that really clearly states why a PD is appropriate versus falling back on general plan and zoning. Those are the things that I have right now on my list, but I'm quite open to including others. So.
Okay, as the seconder of the motion, I would ask that you include the information items that I think Councilman Rennie referred to and that Ms. Quintana referred to?
Yes.
Um,
Do you want me to specify them or just?
Nope.
Okay.
I think they've been stated pretty clearly.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. It's seconded. Is there any other discussion, questions, comments on the motion? Okay, before I call, I have a comment on the motion before I call the question. And I am going to support the motion. However, I'm very troubled by, and I was when I was a member of the council ad hoc committee, and we were working through any kind of proposed changes while PDs were in the process. So that concerns me that Ms. Pavetti has indicated there's a parallel process. I'm going to support the motion, but the only thing that I would say is that our current PD, it is, I think, about a paragraph long or 2 paragraphs long, so in our ordinance. So if anything comes before me as a councilperson, I would be very strictly looking at our current ordinance and exactly what that current ordinance says with respect to those. I think it's a bit premature to put some kind of moratorium on PDs while we're going through this process, because I imagine it's going to be quite lengthy, and I understand that there's been investments made and expectations created with respect to that, but I at least am going to support the motion, being troubled at the fact that there's PDs going through the process before we reach a conclusion. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. One of the reasons, in my mind, that the plan development was viewed by a council ad hoc committee was to move the process along as fast as reasonably could be done. And even at that, it wasn't done that quickly because there were always so many plan developments in the works. As the mayor said, when those plan developments come back before us now, because I think this new process that this motion anticipates is going to take a really long time. So if plan developments come back to us in the interim, I will be looking at our current ordinance very closely and applying it very strictly. When I was listening to the Planning Commission hearing, a lot of the people who were testifying and talking about how good our plan development ordinance work and using examples, we're really citing to examples, for example, in the hillside, which is, yes, that's where they were meant to work. And what you're finding is the way they're being applied now is to intensify the use. We've even had people, developers, tell us that they need the additional units that a plan development will allow because the individuals who are selling the property anticipate there will be a plan development, and so they raise the per square acre cost of the property in order to anticipate this intense development. So there are a lot of things going on, which is why I said why we started out with a council ad hoc committee, which you're going to have extended time now, but these are issues that are going to have to be examined as we go forward in the interim.
Other comments on the motion? Councilwoman Sayak.
Just a question and a comment. The first question, my understanding is that this would have to go through the general plan, then the Planning Commission process anyway. So if I could just get, is that correct or incorrect?
Again, typically the General Plan Committee would come up with a recommendation, and then it would be going to the Planning Commission for its consideration and then back to council. If you wish, you could certainly direct that the committee, the study committee, report directly back to the council to decide whether or not you do want to put any of those recommendations into ordinance form and then go back through the formal process.
Okay. And then the second comment is, I understand quite clearly the existing ordinance. It's quite short. It's 1 paragraph, and to tie into what our mayor and vice mayor have said, that is our guiding language until something new has is brought forward and adopted. And what I want to make clear is that each case is individual, and that because it has happened, let's say, recently within the past 3 years, that's not a guarantee that that's necessarily the process that we will continue to look at plan development, and that we will hopefully continue to look them individually and use the existing paragraph with the scrutiny that this new town council and this composition would like to scrutinize it.
Any other comments or questions on the motion? We have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Passes unanimously. And with that, I am going to adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.